Thank you. Thank you. We're going to start the meeting. I'll declare it open. Thanks very much. We have apologies from Mayor Andrew, who's on the Sister City visit to China, along with the Chief Executive, and also Councillor Young, who's ill. Are there any other apologies? Nope. I'll move the apologies be accepted. Seconder for that, Councillor Tooman, thanks. Those in favour, against, thanks. Now to the confirmation of the agenda. Now, item C1, which was in the public excluded agenda, is being moved to the public agenda. So that will be done at the end. Apologies for that. We had a look at it and could see no reason for it being in public excluded, but it had slipped through the system, so we're going to do a bit more checking in future so that those sort of things don't even get onto that. Yes.
Prime, am I allowed to talk about what's in it?
Well, let me finish that, okay. And I'll come to you, to ask about that, because there's the one other thing with the agenda, or two other things. That means we remove item 12, which is the resolution to exclude the public, because there's nothing else that proposed for that. And the other thing is that, or two other things, sorry, my chair's report, there was a second version of that distributed a day later, which in the second version is the one we're going to talk to when we get there. And as part of the task force work...
So is that second version not in here?
I'm not sure about the hard copy. It's sent out separate cover, thanks. Yeah, if anyone else, just let staff know and they'll get the extra copies. Of course, if you had one of these iPads you're using, you'd get it. You'd get it. The other thing is that at lunch, we're going to be quite strict about the lunch timing, simply because we've organised a walkthrough of some of the parking areas that are being looked at, so that everyone can have a look at what we're talking about, though we're not going to include Harwood Street, because that was too far for us to get in the 40 minutes we've got, and we do have apologies from a couple of councillors for that. It's not compulsory, but we've set the time for that so that you can do lunch and that, hopefully. So, Gary, did you want to ask about the public excluded item?
Yeah. I've read it, and I'm okay to talk about it, am I?
Yes, yes, it's been moved into public. It
contains development contribution remittances.
Yes.
Now, part of it is CBD, which is totally our policy, an open policy, da-da-da, but some of them are not CBD. So are those, why, in the past we have always taken these as private. Yeah. Just why have we decided not to this time?
Not always. Sometimes it seemed to have been different at different times. Okay. But the reason was that we're simply receiving a report of decisions already made under delegated authority by staff, which would have to be made available to the public anyway, those decisions. Okay. So that's what, there's no decision that we're being called on to make in that area, okay, if that makes sense. Yeah. So it's simply reporting to us after the event what's happened, and we can obviously discuss the things in light of our policy and that. So that was why. Did you want to say anything?
Yeah, and just that all of those three were also CBD remissions, so they're all in line with.
So 100% of CBD remissions. Okay. Correct. Yeah. Okay. So if there was some in there that weren't CBD remissions but were something else, I would probably still support them being in public, because it's just a mechanical calculation. Yep, you've overcome your parking thing, so the city no longer has to pay for it, and you're going to do it, or you've sorted out.
That is correct. Yeah. So we have tried to dive into the history about why they've been private in the past, and we can't find a recollection of why. But certainly, our thinking is in line with the chairs and yourselves, that as long as the details are as they are presented, around in line with policy, and where they are delegated authority and decisions made by staff, and for you to note, then it should be public.
So any other person could apply for that remission, and so long as their numbers stack up, they could also get the remission. So
correct.
There's no confidentiality.
Gary, that's getting into the discussion we'll have when we get there, if you don't mind.
Yep. But aren't we approving that this will come into public now?
Simply that, yeah, just that it be discussed in public as part
so
of that.
I wanted to make sure that we weren't treading on anyone's toes and doing that. Yeah.
No, it's staff's opinion now as well, after they've had a look at it too.
Yep.
So if there's no other questions on the agenda, I'll move that the agenda as described by the Chair be received, seconded by Councillor Casson. Those in favour, against, carried. Thanks very much. So declarations of interest, anything new there? No. Public forum now. We have Peter H. Boss, as opposed to the other Peter Boss. Peter, if you'd like to come up to the table, you've got approximately 3 minutes. You know this, you've presented a lot of times. You've got a couple of slides, I understand, as well. And staff of... So we'll just, do we want to wait until we get them up? I won't start counting your 3 minutes yet.
Yes. Oh, good morning, councillors. Thank you for this time. So, okay, so we'll start here. So I'm happy if you go on your phone and you Google AA advocates for 30k speed limits. That's on Hamilton Urban Blog. Okay, so this talk is about Access Hamilton, and I'm asking for you to change the objective, which is on page 41 of your agenda today. I'm asking you to change it to "We will eliminate fatalities and serious injuries." The moment you say reduce. Now, the Hamilton City Council Health and Safety Plan says it's integrated into all business across council. All aspects of council. Policy applies to all, including elected members. Council has primary duty of care of its workers and others. All reasonable practical steps shall be taken to, the word eliminate, that's a really important word. That's not reduce, that's eliminate, and minimise the risk to council-owned, operated facilities and assets. And complying with council's health and safety is not negotiable. Okay, if we look at Fonterra's health and safety vision, we always place our safety values before profit and productivity. We regard repeat incidents as evidence of out-of-control operations. Now, if we look at Port of Tauranga, we will continue to insist that safety is our #1 priority at Port. Above all else, we value human life. So again, that reinforces what you say in your health and safety thing where you eliminate. New Zealand workplace health and safety, it's all about getting people home safely. And I'm asking for Access Hamilton to use the word eliminate in line with Hamilton City Council health and safety policy. Getting all people home healthy and safety is the right thing to do. Yeah, I just push enter? No, there we are. No? Yep. There we go. Oh, here we are. Now, yeah, Hamilton, in the past, we have eliminated traffic fatalities. We've been free of traffic deaths on Hamilton local roads in 2001, on state highways in Hamilton in 2001, on state highways in 2008 we had zero. We were free of traffic deaths. In New Zealand, Easter holidays 2012 we were free of traffic deaths. Queen's birthday, we were free of traffic. 2013, we were free of traffic deaths. Hamilton local roads, 14 to 15, we were free of. We eliminated deaths in that year. And Hamilton state highways, 2015, 2016 again, zero. So Hamilton, 2017, this year, 3 people have died in traffic already this year. Access Hamilton's objective doesn't say eliminate. Says reduce. Having 2 people killed next year meets Hamilton Access objective. Does this meet Hamilton City Council's health and safety policy? Is this your goal? Is this your objective? So health and, oh, good, okay. It goes fast, doesn't it?
It does. But thanks, Peter. Look, I'm open to questions now. You can keep playing the slides through. I'm looking at here, that's good. So, firstly, questions. Gary, thanks.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Peter. Peter, you're a smart guy, so you obviously understand there are things that are within our jurisdiction and things that are not within our jurisdiction. For example, Hamilton City Council has absolutely no control over the state of the person behind the wheel, or the state of the person on the bike, or the state of the person and the actions and the behaviour of the person riding or running on the road at night in black clothes and things like that. So other than becoming an absolute dictatorial dictatorship, how do we change other people's behaviour? We can spend millions of dollars improving our roads, we can spend millions of dollars in education on better ways to travel, all that sort of stuff, but there's only so much, we are not gods. Nowhere near.
Workplace health and safety says the same thing. It says that you have to...
So how do we stop people driving drunk? How does the Hamilton City Council stop people driving drunk?
Workplace safety, as your workplace safety thing says, you're eliminating it. Hang on.
I think Gary's
We're
after
talking about the real world, not things written on
from,
bits of paper.
from your
Yes.
from your opinion, yeah.
Workplace health and safety says the same thing. It is... Yes, here it is. So a business must also look after people who could be at risk by the work of the business. For example, customers, visitors, children, young people, and the general public. Your health and safety policy says exactly the same thing. And it says your assets. So you have to do everything reasonable, practical, to eliminate deaths.
You know,
That's
the law,
your duty. That's your duty.
You know the law doesn't allow us to stop people and breath test them. You know that, don't you? You know the law doesn't allow us to stop a person. Lots of the behaviours that cause death on the road.
Gary, you're entering into a bit of debate.
I'm asking you a question.
Yeah,
do you know that? Yeah.
Yes, you're right. No, Gary, that's fine. Can you zoom in on this? This is. How do you zoom in on this?
Well, I think Gary is asking
you. So what stays on the top thing there?
Peter, Gary is asking you for your opinion on these things, not, he's asking you how you would achieve what you've said you want us to achieve.
Well, what has happened? We're all traffic engineers. At the end of the day, we're all traffic engineers.
But we're not.
But we all want to.
That's a throwaway jargon thing. We're not all traffic engineers.
Gary, please,
at the same time,
let him speak.
Yeah, at the same time, as city leaders, you delegate that to your traffic engineers. And if we're looking at traffic, then you ask them what to do. They understand it. This is in Europe. You've got 200 cities that have got 0 road fatalities. In Norway, they were having, in the 70s, over 100 children a year were dying. 2015, none. They went from 100 to 0. It's the same with Stockholm. A cyclist hasn't been killed commuting to work since 2011. So and if we look at our own experience in Hamilton, we do achieve it, but it's ad hoc. It's not a goal. It's not an objective. So what I'm asking is you to make that objective and then do everything practically reasonable to reach that objective. To have an objective of 2 people dying is not moral, is not ethical. And that's what that's the focus on this, what I'm focusing on.
Okay, Gary, finish?
Yep.
I've got James next, thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. My question is a little bit on Gary's, what Gary's asked. Yeah, your tangent. Look, for a goal to be achievable, well, a goal has to be achievable.
Yes.
And we're not saying here that we want to just reduce it down to 2. My question for you is, how does City Council control? There's all sorts of events can happen. There's alcohol that can be involved. There's medical events that can be involved as well. Someone can have a heart attack, veer across the road in a car and hit a child or hit somebody else, which happened on the Bridge Street Bridge. How do we control those things outside of our control?
Okay, I'll go back to the original. I've got to focus on the wording. You want to eliminate, you don't want to reduce. Now, this is your objective. Now, how you do it is a second part, and that goes through consultation and evidence. But what is your objective? Is your objective just to reduce? So next year, to reach your objective next year is have 2 people killed? Or is your objective to eliminate? Now, if you have 2 people killed next year, you've failed. And then you try again, and you try again. It's not just to reduce to 2, it's to eliminate. That's what I'm asking you to do.
Yep. With my
Your
experience,
objective.
yeah, okay. With my experience in the police, though, like the police have an objective to reduce offending by 25% or whatever else.
Yes. Workplace has 25%.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's right. But police and other organisations don't have in their wording to eliminate because it's an unachievable target.
But yours does.
Sorry, we're getting into a bit of debate here as well.
Yeah, I don't know how we're going to.
I use the words for your health and safety policy.
Yeah.
That's what I'm asking.
Just a word, councillors, what you have from Access Hamilton proposed here is not the final thing, it's just a progress report, so it's going to go back for more debate at the working party anyway, including all the points that are discussed today. So we're not going to be voting today on the final wording of that document. Just to remind you, I've got Siggy next.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Peter. I actually totally agree with you. Eliminate is the right word. And it is about words. Yeah, it's coming. It's coming. But, I mean, one of the questions, I mean, you've sent us lots of things already about this, and I agree with that. Will you help us? Because some of you have got so much background knowledge, and we probably don't. So is there any way that you can help us?
This talk here is supported by the Cycle Action Network, which is the nationwide, and it's the focus of them that they want councils and the government to have a goal of no traffic deaths. Not I think the national government, or this national government, but the central government, that's right, yeah, has a goal of killing 39 people in 2014. Well, we want them to say the goal is 0 and keep striving for that goal. Cycle Action Waikato will be involved with, will participate in whatever you do. And the staff do contact.
So you said there's, thank you. There's 200 cities that are totally free.
Yes.
And so are there detailed accounts why that has happened, why they're free of road toll?
Yes, the Scandinavian ones committed in the 90s to go to 0.
Okay.
And they just keep committing in the 90s they keep committing to 0.
Okay.
And that is their goal. And they've reduced their death toll by something like 80%.
Okay.
Well, we're 30 to 50 something. We're in the 30s to 50s. So we're we've done half of what they've done.
Okay.
But it's leadership. It takes leadership, and it starts with having a goal, an objective that says we want 0. We want nothing. We don't want just a few or a few less. We want 0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Awesome.
I've got Mark and then Paula.
Yep, thank you. Just very briefly, so what you're after is a language change?
Yes.
And it's as simple as that, am I right? Cool, that's all for me.
Waffly.
I'm done.
Sorry, Mark.
Yeah, I was just saying, I was just asking.
Just change that word.
So we're just after a language change in the Access Hamilton policy? Okay.
Yeah, okay. And Paula, thanks.
Peter, you're familiar with the wording in the regional land transport around targets for cycling safety, and because my understanding is
I read a lot.
Yeah, I know you're very familiar with. You're very you're excellent at continuing to push for safe cycling. So congratulations on that. My understanding is that this wording we landed on was consistent with the RLTP and other NZTA initiatives around. Have you been also submitting to them around the language? Because this eliminate or reduce.
Yeah, Paula, you're right, it is consistent. That's what Chris has been showing me, some of that stuff.
So it's consistent with the national approach is what I'm saying. So are you also talking with NZTA?
And the regional council is going through the process now, and NZTA I'm sure NZTA is also involved, and I'm asking Hamilton City Council to make their Access Hamilton policy in line with their health and safety, your health and safety policy.
Yeah. So you're suggesting no different than what has been sought in waste in the past, taking a zero waste approach, knowing that there isn't really any such thing as zero waste at the moment, but you're talking about an aspirational target.
But they do need a real target. You do need to say when you want to get, not just to say we want to be 0. You've got to actually have something behind it. And the United States, if they, a lot of United States cities are going to Vision Zero, and part of that is they've got to set a clear goal for traffic fatalities, eliminating traffic fatalities, but it's the mayor has to publicly, officially commit to eliminating. And it is, well, the mayor's not here, but it is for you people to support the mayor, and it has to come from the mayor. I know Nottingham has got a very active city councillor who has made big changes. Yeah, in England, and they have had zero. But
sorry, just a question so we can all hear.
Yeah, so just to the point, my last question is then the importance that this is the top level objective, and you're suggesting that any more pragmatic and reasonable targets to make progress would occur further down in the more subservient in the document.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thanks. And Peter, I had one final question to ask you about. You've focused on fatalities in here. It's often been pointed out by some of the other 162,000 traffic engineers in Hamilton that it's not just that, it's also serious injury that's at stake here and happening too often. Would you say we should have targets in relation to that, or just fatalities? Is that all you're focusing on?
Limit traffic fatalities and severe injuries. Right. Of course, if you survive a real serious crash, you become a serious injury, which is probably better than a fatality.
Yep. Thanks.
So, yes, fatalities will go up. I mean, not fatalities, injuries.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, thanks very much for that. Thank you for your time, Peter, as usual. Thanks for challenging us. That will come up later. And I think, Gary, when Peter said to us that we were all, we were traffic engineers, he was quoting, or at least paraphrasing, the general manager over here who often says that, or often complains about that.
Stating fact.
I expect you to challenge it. But traffic engineers, that's different. We've all got an opinion in the traffic. Yeah. Okay, councillors, thanks very much. Thank you. We don't have to move anything for that? No. Okay, we're on to the minutes of the meeting on the 28th of February. Are there any questions or alterations people would like to suggest to them at this point? If not, I'll move that they be received. I think that's the right one there. And seconded by Councillor Taylor. Any discussion on that? If not, I'll put that. Those in favour, against, carried unanimously. Thanks. Okay, we're on to the Chair's report. Now, councillors, it's identical for the first three parts. The only addition was to do with the Richmond Park School. But if you would like to, I'm not going to speak to that except if there's any questions to the report at this point, but staff are going to say some things. So I just don't know, do you want a couple of minutes, those of you who haven't seen the Richmond Park School part, to read that, which is the last bit? Sorry, just before you go, Gary, if you'd like to just flick to that, that's the new bit. The rest was sent out with the original papers. So just have a flick through that for 30 seconds or so, and then we'll go to questions on it, and noting that staff are also going to speak on one or two aspects of this. Never seen it so silent in there. Okay, I presume you've had time to glance through it. I've got questions first from Gary.
Thanks, Dave. Hamilton Auckland passenger rail.
Yep.
That's getting a lot of public play at the moment. Just what resolutions do we have on our books about that?
Chris might like to remind us, but I know in terms of our work stream, we were due last meeting to receive a report on securing or not some land for future park and ride and platform sort of base for that, which I asked to be held up while this other work was going on. So the two parts, the work being the that I've mentioned here, the regional council's involved in, so that we did the two parts together, not sort of looked at them in isolation from each other. So that's a work stream. I don't know about the resolution. I just want to check with Chris.
Yeah, councillors, we actually deal with the issue in the GM's report, so page 38 of your agenda. So there's an update in there in the process and some timetables. So we're bringing it back to elected member briefing on the 15th. We're due to report to Growth and Infrastructure on the 20th. In summary, the regional council looking at a process potentially of developing a business case for Hamilton to rail. So they've asked participating councils and stakeholders for their view on some options and how to take it forward. So we're due to report back to the Regional Land Transport Committee on the 3rd of July. So the process that we've chosen to do is a briefing on the 15th, a report to Growth and Infrastructure commenting on a discussion paper that Regional Council have put out. And the issue that we've been debating at Council is about future-proofing land for future stations and park and rides. So we're going to mesh the two together as we report up to Council on the 20th of June.
So, okay, so what specifically has the Hamilton City Council resolved? We have resolved to, because we haven't said we're going to have a train going up to Auckland and back again. No. We've just, so why are we looking to buy land for park and ride when we haven't got, I mean, I understand, look, people probably know my view on this thing, but I'm just wanting to make sure we don't do a whole lot of stuff before we've even made the resolution. And
no, we won't. The purpose is to come back to Growth and Infrastructure to outline the opportunities for future proofing. So looking at a potential service and what opportunities. For instance, we'll report back that we have a rail station at Frankton. It's very unlikely that Kiwi Rail are going to sell off the land they've got there, so that site is future-proof. So it's just looking at potential sites and what the options are. So Council's made no decision other than to bring a report back to Growth and Infrastructure. The timing of it...
So we have asked you to do a report, have we?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. I think options and risks, Gary, as well, for build-out type risks.
Because we know, I mean, we all know we've done it 2 or 3 times before and it's never worked.
But I think the regional council report is based around a business case and working with all the partners to look at a business case. So you'll get the opportunity to discuss that as council at the briefing in June in terms of what is our response to regional council, and they'll outline a number of options.
How much are we spending on it, on this work?
Just staff time.
Gary, I think, sorry, I'm not trying to cut you off because we're going to have that discussion again through the GM's report. All I'm trying to do through mine is highlight some issues that I or the committee or parts of the committee are involved in, just for your information. But we're going to come back to questions like what the staff work that's happening at the moment during the GM's report. I know it's sort of dovetailing with that, but it's just to give you a heads up, really. Siggy, you were next.
Thank you so much. I just, might be a little bit of a rhetoric question, but maybe somebody might have an answer to that. Why do we have so much faith in the government when they screw up so often, like with the numbers here of how many people live in Hamilton?
So you're talking about the planning for growth?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's an exceptionally good question, which I can't possibly answer.
Just wondering, maybe somebody can one day.
Except to say that about 10 years ago, we discovered that the government's answers were way out of kilter, and we decided, along with other councils in the Waikato, including the regional council, to get our own answers through Waikato University, because we realised that what you're saying now has been a problem for a while.
Okay. The other thing is, what are we going to do about, I mean, you highlighted the complaints process there. I think it's still not working, right? So what can we do to improve that?
Chris and Kelvin and Jeff and I have had a bit of a talk about that, and Leanne, so I don't know, Chris, do you want to tell Siggy what's in the pipeline for re-complaints?
Yep, I think we've got an item on a briefing agenda coming up, which will just talk to councillors about the systems we've got and how we track things. There's a more specific one for me in item 8 of the Chair's report. So I've talked to the Chair just about the transport issues and changing or reviewing our process and how we do that. I've got a meeting this week with my staff to embed that. It's going to be just a bit of clarity coming up to councillors about the most expedient way to deal with issues and how to get the best out of us in terms of responses. So following that meeting, I'll report back on that process and make it clear for my area. But also, I think the briefing that we're proposing, Calvin, what date do you know?
I think we've just moved it to July. So I think we're talking about two processes. One is the formal complaints process we have as council, which is around complaint around timing or service requests, normal that would come from public. Some of those come to you, and then how can you use that to come through the GM and make sure that is appropriately set up. And then the discussion we had yesterday was around the more complex issues, for example, Valley Terrace or Heath Street, where there are numbers of neighbours involved, but more importantly, where there are numbers of councillors who wish to be involved, and how do we ensure that there is a lead within from the political realm who also connects to the GM, so that we know there is one point of contact and keeps everyone in the loop. And that's the discussion we should have at the briefing, in line with that discussion.
So that's meant that we can refine. They're going to tell us what's happening now, what they think should happen, and then it's up to us to express our opinions on that to management at the briefing.
So absolutely. So there's the formal kind of process that exists now, and let you know how that works, and that's a very simple request for service or complaints about whatever. But then, how do you then add where there is multiple, where people have come to you in multiple numbers, or where you've all received the same email, or in those areas, and we'll work out how do we ensure that the communication and the protocols around it is right, so that we make sure we sign those things off. And that's the discussion, I think, in the discussion with the Chair, that you would all have an interest in how that would work. So.
Yep. Okay. Your acting worship, Councillor Gallagher.
The real mayor is in Chengdu. He's still there, on the phone all the time. As you'd expect, but I just want to, I think really, I'll just ask you a more precise question around the base opportunities and the process and under your report.
Yep.
But I just want to perhaps pick up, Mr. Chair, if I can, is it right, just to your concerns around the, all the organisations, DHB, Regional Council, Hamilton, coming off the same population projection data. That is still very significant in my view for a potential commuter rail. And perhaps I'm happy to. I think that's quite a serious. Personally, I think it's quite a serious issue that we ensure and get assurance from all the major organisations, Waikato Plan, Future Proof, DHB Plan, ourselves, that we're coming off the same sets of data.
One of the things that Blair mentioned to me in an email yesterday, he's unable to be here today because he's making a presentation to Waipa District Council about our water resolution from the other day, but he mentioned that Future Proof has set up has got some working parties working on this with staff and with elected members, and where DHB is going to be invited to be part of that, as are other big organisations like Tainui and NZTA. So the DHB is going to be included more, though he pointed out on the technical group there's already a couple of DHB staff members who clearly haven't been passing that information along to their planners. Kelvin, do you know whether you want to say
if I can add to that, there is a formal report coming to the Future Proof subcommittee to recommend that the DHB be involved as observers at the technical and the governance level, as well as the executive level. So there will be that coverage, as you pointed out. There may be some technical, but it's not filtering through. So there is a formal report coming to the Future Proof subcommittee asking for that invitation to be extended at all three levels. Tainui and NZTA are already members of that Future Proof in the same vein. So we hope to try and bridge that gap on that basis.
And I think it was agreed that it was really important that the message that goes to Wellington from whichever group it is here is based on the same statistics.
My other concern is to ensure all these agencies are accessing the same set of research capacity. We have a very good demographic population studies at our own university. And it's really important that we're not, and I'm not sure of this, to be honest. I just want to ensure that the same key research people are in the same room at the same time. I think that's, personally, in terms of a good financial management of a resource, that's important.
Yes, and there is under the Regional Council, if I may, Chairman, they have a larger stakeholder group that uses the same data that you're speaking to, and that is at a more technical and more officer level. I think that the disconnect has been how the technical and officer level connects right through the DHB to allow good governance decisions as well in line. So we hope that the future-proof invitation will be picked up on that basis.
Just perhaps a final, and it relates to your paper too, around the transport issue. Just as, dare I say it, 10, 20 years ago, we talked about a transport corridor for the expressway, we planned ahead. Obviously, the future-proof population projections will be giving us information around that whole commuter corridor between Auckland and Hamilton. So logically, just as we plan for an expressway, one would assume we plan for passenger. Well, it's a general question.
So the answer is yes.
Can you confirm
your assumption is correct.
Could you confirm, Mr. Chair, you support long-term planning?
Probably a couple. Would you get me one as well? I think the message is there. Angela, have you got a question?
Indeed, I do. I always follow the rules, you know that. It's actually a question to Chris on clarification of Councillor Mallett's question was around why we're doing this work, we don't have a resolution. But my understanding, and you can clarify this if I'm right or not, is that you could go back and look at regional plans that we've signed up to, our strategic plans, all sorts of things, and find we've kept this alive on the books. So it's not quite right to say there's no resolution here. That's my understanding, and certainly well before my time on council. Is that right?
Yeah, there are strategic linkages if you go to the regional land transport plan. So there are strategic references to the Auckland to Hamilton rail station.
But also that
rail service.
Isn't it right that we have maintained a positive future outcome with rail, and we have been consistent with that resolution?
That's correct. So for example, in our planning in the Rotorua structure plan, we've identified a potential future location for a rail station. So the notion of a rail service is embedded strategically into our transport thinking.
I just wanted clarification on that, because I think that that's an important point to
no details,
keep live.
But the
and
high level.
No funding, but that council hasn't said not interested, take it off the books.
Oh no, absolutely not. I've never said that.
No,
I think the general consensus has been it's just a matter of when, not if.
Okay, James, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, mine is more of a comment on the complaints process there. I've actually had a few reports made to me by members of the public, which I've forwarded on to both Chris and Kelvin and staff, and I've had very good responses to that and had the situations fixed. So I'm not sure if it's the same with every other councillor, but I've had no problems whatsoever.
I think we've all had that, but we've also, many of us, if not everyone, have had ones where things have fallen through the cracks and become bigger issues than they need have because they weren't necessarily handled right, or because councillors who passed them on didn't get information about feedback of what happened. So there were some issues around that sort of thing. It's not questioning. There's been very little questioning of the staff's work. It's been tell us what it is and make sure the sort of loops are closed.
Haven't had one yet. I'll let you know if I do.
We might forward some on to you. Take some load off some others. Councillor, I just want to draw your attention to the last bit, the Richmond Park school issue, and that was put in there. Partly I was interested, obviously, but I had about 6 councillors express to me an interest in that as well after the media report came out a week and a half or so ago, and many of them were on the same lines. Why the hell are they selling it when it might be needed for the Peacock's growth area? Sort of related questions, and Kelvin's received a bit of feedback from the Ministry of Education of Wellington about that and the parts that were missing maybe from that media report. It wasn't that it was wrong, it was just that there were some other elements that weren't covered by it, I think.
Yeah, so just in context, we do work with the Ministry of Education planning, and of course the focus has been on previously Rototuna and then of course now Rotokauri, so that we are working with them in terms of their planning side. And of course Peacocks were brought into the recent 10-year plan, and so they hadn't been considering that because we hadn't been looking at development in that short time. However, the point that the Chair raises is now that it is there, where is the consideration of where this current empty school sits? They've since come back from Wellington and said they are looking at some sort of subdivision to retain the kohangas that are operating there now, but there's no indication as to what they would want to subdivide for or what the purpose would be otherwise. We've checked into the designation. It is zoned as community facilities, which is most schools are zoned as such, and any change to that subdivision or any requirements they would have to go through a private plan change or resource consent process. And at this point there has been no proposal to us, apart from what we've seen in the media. We don't have an application on board, and they have obviously been a government site. It would be open to first rights of refusal by Tainui as well within that discussion, and I think they have offered that they would be prepared to come and talk to us and present about what they are looking at of any proposal. But the indication is what they would do or why they would subdivide it other than the protection of the kohanga is unknown at this stage.
Yeah. The other point just of interest to council specifically is that there's a hall there that the community have long been saying should be available for use still by the community, and that council actually put some money into it in about 1999 or 2000, put a 5-figure sum into it. No, or they might have put it in twice because they also put some, 1980s, so I don't go back that far. Okay. So there's a council sort of interest in a financial sense in that hall as well on that site. So a lot of discussion to be had, I think, is what we've come up with as a result of this. So, councillors, I've proposed a couple of resolutions there. It doesn't seem that they're going ahead with the sale quite as quickly as the newspaper implied, but I feel that we'd want to head that off until there's some good public discussion and discussion with the council about our growth plans in the vicinity. So I've put that resolution forward, and I'm happy to, and that we should convene a discussion ourselves with the interested parties. MP for the area, Tim McIndoe, has expressed an interest in being part of those discussions, and as have quite a few councillors that have communicated with me. So I've put the A and B on the second page there forward, and I'd probably move that now. I probably should have stuck an A in there that the report be received. Yeah, so that would be B and C if we can change that. Thanks, Becca. So I'm going to go ahead with moving that. If there's a sorry, I just got a second from Grant. Yeah, James. Sorry. Yep.
Would it be better to put report receive A and then a second recommendation? They're quite different.
That's exactly.
Sorry. So
I'm happy to take them separately, Gary. The B and C separate from A. Yep. Take your point. Yep. So, firstly, I'll move that the Chair's report be received, which has been seconded by Gary. Those in favour, against, that's carried unanimously. That will go on to those two. You can see up there that it's still A and B, but in a different section. So, and it's been seconded by James. I think I've said enough on that. Would the other councillors like to speak? Councillor Gallagher and then Councillor Southgate. Can you? Yeah, that's right. Yep.
I think in terms of jurisdiction, it's really working whether, as we progress this forward, whether this sits here or in the Community Services, committee. I mean, it's not that's an agenda detail. Because there's issues around obviously future school and growth and development, and obviously around the whole issue of community space and recreation space, and that's something that we can determine. I do, however, strongly support the motion very much to send a very clear message to the Ministry of Education. We've had some really good examples of good work and good cooperation with the Ministry and schools, and the Rototuna Recreation Centre is the showpiece of that. Frankly, it is disgraceful that some officials in the Ministry of Education decide to issue a media statement to declare a community space in the Richmond Park area is surplus to requirements. My message as Deputy Mayor of this city and elected ward member to the Ministry of Education officials is this is a community space. We have an open mind as to how that evolves in future. This is not a simple issue of surplus land. I was personally at the opening of the school hall that Trevor Mallard opened, and there was great community spirit back in the 80s. There was members of that Melville community there in the 80s, and that is definitely a community space, a community hall, where there's been considerable community funding and fundraising in addition to our taxes going, and that's number one. Number two, there were some unique issues why Richmond Park closed at the time, and there have been alternative uses for that site. What I think is absolutely crucial is this council has to say to the Ministry of Education, we will be around the table at all times as we evolve the discussions in terms of using that site. We are representative of our community. We have some issues, for example, in that area, in my view, about adequacy of green space, of passive green space. We can go and kick a ball around in that particular area. So I'm really looking forward to this council sitting around the table with the Ministry, with Tainui. Very, very pleased that the Associate Minister of Education, the Honourable Tim McIndoe, has expressed a keen interest as our local MP to be part of this discussion, and that is really good. So in summary, the bouquet is to the Ministry, who by and large have been pretty good in terms of Rototuna and the other things we're doing. That's great. This unfortunately somehow seemed to slip through the cracks. And I don't want to read in a newspaper about some school being sold off as surplus to requirements. Thank you very much. I support this motion.
Thank you. Paula.
Thank you, Chairman Dave. I support the motion as well. Notwithstanding it's West Ward councillors, but I think you can't all be involved in everything, and you guys will do a good job advocating. I'm just really interested. I was one of those councillors when you sent down the press release, Dave, and I thought, what? Mm-hmm. Straight away, that would be a complete shame that there's a disconnect in conversation going on. What I'm interested in going forward, though, is getting some dialogue with the MOE around their whole of city vision for education, because I think that's relevant. We've got a growing city. We're certainly proposing to look at south growth plus higher up in the west. What is the capacity of the schools across the city? How are they going to meet the capacity for educational facilities as we go forward? Because I think that is wholly relevant. And if that school doesn't get reused, where does the other capacity go? There's Melville. What, do they go up to Fraser or go to Girls High? Girls High is pretty much a capacity. It's a pretty huge school now. Where do they go? And with the bubble of younger, kindergarten age children as well, where do those go? Where are the families going to live in the affordable type housing where they're going to have young families wanting to go through primary school? We need to have a totally engaged and integrated conversation about that, so that the population politics, the population forecast, I should say, and the strategic approach to providing education in the city fit. And this is just one part of it. So I'm just asking that that group do consider asking them to engage with us about a whole of city response to education.
If I might, just not in response, in support of that, Kelvin, I'm wondering if that could be the next meeting part of the GM's report, the wider strategic aspect of this that Paul has raised. I know that we talked to them in respect of individual growth cells, how they're going to handle that, but there's a lot of spillover outside of them, and no growth cell has a Trump-like wall around it either. So we need to do that sort of work. So would that be all right if we?
Yeah. So just
and they've also offered to come and speak with us at this meeting, the ministry.
Yes. So I think that would be a useful discussion to have with them, and I can tee that up as part of the resolution. I know they work on a basis of catchment, rather than growth cell as we do. So they look at a catchment area. So what that means, I'm unsure of, but certainly I think the discussion so that we have an understanding is useful.
Yeah, so if they're talking about catchment, and I was aware of that, and we're talking about growth scales, we've got to make sure that those things are consistent with each other in some way, because there's no point in putting the facilities where people aren't living. And Dave, we were talking about transport before. It has a flow-on effect, because then those students can't walk to school; they have to bus or cycle or get in cars with their parents, and that causes a whole raft of other pressures. So, I just want to look at it in that holistic area, because my suspicion is that there'll be quite a few schools that are reaching their capacity in Hamilton right now. Could be wrong, but I'd like some further understanding about that.
Yep.
Thank you.
No, great points. Jeff, thanks.
I want to support the motion as well. I was shocked and surprised by what we saw in the paper, and given that there is some partnership going on with examples such as the Rototuna School rec centre there, it defies belief to me that the ministry can come up with such an option, or appear to be coming up with such an option at a time when it's widely known that we're pursuing peacocks and potentially at great expense, which indirectly is going to feed into Glenview and Melville schools. That would be the hope. So it sort of defies belief, really. And I scratch my head that a government department can seem to be operating in such isolation of what's going on in the real world. Just on a wider level, and following on from what Paula is saying, our relationship with the ministry does concern me at a wider level, with things such as school buses, services that they're running for schools, given the congestion that we have in the morning rush hour. And I'd like to see some way where we could pursue a better relationship overall with the ministry, some sort of forum or something where as political members we can actually be satisfied that there's a good relationship there. I presume there's staff relationship going on, but at a political level I'd be keen on some sort of forum there.
Well, I think that could be factored into these discussions that come out of this, and the report back that Kelvin's talking about at the following meeting as well. I think that all makes sense. I might also point out that, and I'll take this as my right of reply, unless anyone else, that Tainui, who would have first right of refusal on that land, Crown land, and they had not been told about it either, and they, at the same time as we sent a please explain message to Wellington MOE, so did they. So it's not just us that have been kept in the dark, let's say. Yeah. So look, we've just changed something there. That's right. No, we were presuming to make a decision for council. It was pointed out to me that we can only make it for the Growth and Infrastructure Committee. So we've put that, tidy that up at the top there. So that's the resolution. If that's all right with the seconder, James. Yep. Thanks. Look, we'll have a vote on hands. Those in favour, against. Yep, that's unanimous. Thanks. It wasn't Martin being against, he was just late. Okay, so that's that report, thanks. We're moving on to the GM's report, which is on page 34, I think, is it? It says that here.
34, yeah.
Yep. So who's starting off, Chris or... Jason, so sorry, I'm just... moving to it myself.
So you'll just go through topic.
Yeah, and so what I thought we'd do is go through, Jason's going to come up and help us here as well, go through topic by topic. So the first topic is the schedule of reports, so which is, that's a separate actual report, so let's not discuss that now because we'll come to the actual schedule later in the meeting, the following item. So moving on to the paving on footpaths and the item headed 12. Jason, are you going to talk to that?
Yeah, just briefly. So at the G&I committee meeting of the 14th of February, we had a request to come back with information around paving.
Sorry, page 35, which is the second page of the report, item 12 down to... Paragraph 12. Sorry, Paula.
So this was looking at the paving opportunities and the cost of paving that we look at across the city. So as part of this, you'll
sorry, sorry, Jason, to interrupt. That actual table is on page 40.
Yes.
So you might, when you're talking about that, councillors might want to refer to that as well as
so I was
the report.
Yep. So just on page 40, you'll see we've broken it down, a table there that shows you on the left-hand column footpaths versus roads and the sorts of treatments that we look at in terms of when we're looking to resurface in certain areas. Then we provide you some financial information about the cost per square metre, benefits and risks of using those sorts of treatments, and some general comments. So a lot of information there. Just happy to take questions that you may have.
Yeah. And Gary's first, and I'll note that Gary's been raising the issue about the cost of cobblestones for a long time. We said we'd get this information here, so it's all yours, Gary.
Thank you. Firstly, just a general comment about the agenda the whole way through. And I've asked this a number of times before. For example, paragraph 13, at the meeting held on the 14th of February, can we please put the year in all the time, just to be precise about things?
Yeah.
I know sometimes it's bloody obvious what year it's going to be, and it's this report and all of our reports are riddled with dates with no year on them. Thank you. I'm just referring now to page 40, beg your pardon, the fold out. Just what's P&G, Jason?
Oh, those are preliminary and general costs.
So I don't know. Okay, what are they?
Yep. So when we're looking at building up pricing, we look at the cost of the actual work and the labour, but then there'll be what we call a P&G item. So this is the cost for doing business. It may include insurances, off-site overheads, things that aren't directly related to putting the paving or the surfacing on the ground. So
why would we consider them at all?
Why?
Yeah.
The part of the build-up of the cost for doing that work. And so they're spread across all activities.
So if we're trying to compare asphalt versus concrete or something like that, can we assume the P&G costs are the same? There is no change. So, because to be honest, all I just want to find out, I want to get a concise difference in the quality of the product versus the cost of the product. If those other things, insurance and all that sort of stuff, are the same or across them all, don't confuse the situation.
The overheads are, they're included in everything, but Gary's asking, are they the same for a square metre, no matter what surface you're using?
I mean, I'm otherwise, how on earth can we make a judgment? You know, we've got...
Sure. Look, they are. For my personal opinion is that they are talking to the contractor in terms of how we build up our TCE, or our target cost estimate, each year.
Yeah.
Okay. And so they are spread across a number of items, and that's what you're seeing there. So that's why we've included that, just for visibility or transparency.
So at a summary level, Gary, I think you can assume that these are all inclusive costs and they're perfect for comparison between the options.
So that third column in, those cost per square metre cost is what you're talking about?
Yeah. Just noting that there's a lot of preciseness in these costs, because they're a point in time in our arrangement with the Alliance at this point in time. But they're perfectly adequate, I think, for making assumptions that cobblestones are 3 times the cost or whatever.
Right, thank you. And what's TTM?
Temporary traffic management. So when we're doing any physical works, there's a need to ensure we create a safe environment for both the workers but also the public, and so that's the cones, signage, and any related vehicles.
So is that something that is the same no matter what product we're using?
It really depends on the site. It's not so much...
I'm trying to get it such that the only thing I'm looking at is quality and cost. If paving cobblestones or paving with asphalt or paving with concrete drives the same TTM, then I can ignore the TTM because it doesn't change per product, does it? Is that right? Can I do
so
that?
if we were looking at this one particular site and we're wanting to choose between cobbles versus
So in all other things being equal, well, I'm trying to get to an all other things being equal situation.
They would be, like for that site.
Thank you. All right. Okay, and just on the site-specific, so halfway down or so, site-specific treatment asphalt with paving slips, go across to the risks column.
Yes.
The solution provided may be perceived to offer a lower... Okay, that's the perception. What's the reality?
We've received nothing but positive comments about the work that within that comment stream.
So sorry, this says the solution provided may be perceived to offer a lower customer level of service than cobblestones. So that means people are saying, I don't like these things, I'd rather have cobblestones. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, look, there was a risk that we had identified because it was cobbled before. Granted, they were due for replacement. Yeah. And so we put in an AC treatment with cobble strips through it.
I don't know what AC means.
Asphalt.
Please,
asphalt concrete.
No acronyms. You've been quite good at explaining them so far.
The black stuff that you see on footpaths.
Okay. Okay. And there's a real doozy in other comments. So the second to last box is asphalt surfacing brackets reseal. You come right across to the right. Average rate in 1670 for a whole host of treatments and mixes. Yeah. Generally 35 to 45 millimetres layer thickness, and it's inclusive of all milling required at the site plus road marking. What does all that mean?
Okay, so what those acronyms, it's just...
I think I've got, well, actually no, I haven't got all the acronyms. AC is asphalt, but I don't know what SMA is or...
Stonemastic asphalt, they're all asphalts, but a different type of black stuff that you would use in different situations.
Black stuff.
Like the cost for the milling, the road marking, you could ignore those because they would be the same regardless of what asphalt treatment that you selected.
Okay, so if you're looking for the most cost-effective product, would it be rational to go asphalt divided by, so just for everyone, so the first one is asphalt, which is $69.45, can last up to 20 years. So if we go $69 divided by 20, gives us $3 a year, or a bit more than $3 a year. We come down to, so is that a kind of a rational thing for a guy who's not a traffic engineer? Yeah. I'm quite happy to say I'm the Hamiltonian who is not a traffic engineer.
Well, you're sounding very much
other
like
than all the rest of them who are. Okay, so if we say that's $3 and something cents, that we go into concrete, would it be rational to take the 124 and divide it by 55, say, being that midpoint between 50 and 60?
Yeah. Yeah, for footpaths. Yeah.
Okay. No, well, it's important that, like, I'm just trying to get some sort of way to measure these things.
Okay.
And then on top of that, I guess you take into effect the aesthetic. Okay, so leaving aesthetics aside, there are other issues, which is noise. What are the other issues that we need to, okay, just putting aesthetics...
Are you talking about footpaths in specifically?
I think it's... Well, with all of the things, but yeah, I guess footpaths at the moment, then we'll look at road servicings. Yep. So how's a rational way for a non-roading engineer to assess these things? Because I'm trying to get the best cost for, best value for our buck, for the ratepayer.
Yep.
So I'm trying to get safe roads that don't have to be replaced all the time or potholed. At the best price.
Okay. Well, I suppose looking at where it would be used, whether it's in the residential area versus commercial versus central city.
So what are the points there?
So residential, and our tech spec allows for both AC and concrete. Concrete has a longer lasting life.
Yeah.
But we're mindful that where there's it's a lot harder, more expensive to replace than asphalt. And
so, but hang on. Just so if I just do that cost divided by years thing,
Yep.
I come out with a cost per year over the life of the product.
Yep.
I would then pick the cheapest one. And what are and is that the right way to do it? Because are there other factors that matter in residential versus somewhere else? Because we always want our roads to last for as long and be as safe as long as they can be for the cheapest cost.
Yeah. So concrete's a lot more forgiving in terms of settlement. Like you won't get the sorts of, like in AC you'll get more of a wave in the pavement, so it may create more trip hazards. Yeah. But with concrete, you know, especially around trees, you know, you've got trip hazards there again. But going back to first principles, it's about providing the longest, I suppose, the product that will last the longest with minimal maintenance in any particular situation. And look, we have a combination of footpaths that are concrete versus asphalt throughout the city. And so where we have those in the existing environment, we look to match like for like. So we wouldn't use AC in a concrete area or concrete.
We have no concrete roads, do we?
Oh, I'm talking about footpaths.
Okay, footpath, yeah.
So to answer your question, we do look to use the most economical option or treatment to provide the best outcome for the community.
So very quickly, and I've only just done this right now, so I could be wrong here. If I take $124, so concrete, $124, I've left the 71 cents off, over 55 years, that comes out at $2.25 per year. That's your amortisation or something like that, okay? And if you then look at asphalt, that came out at about something over $3. So wouldn't it be a no-brainer to do concrete?
Well,
because it's about 30% cheaper.
But then, Gary, you have to look at financing costs as well and debt and so forth, because it's a higher up front. So that's and it depends what budget we've given them to work with in a given year.
But so that good. That's a rational way to go on, Chris.
But look, I think there's so many different factors that come into a decision.
Well, that's what I'm trying to get you.
But, you know, for instance, tree roots and movement. So asphalt's a lot more flexible.
Well, you know my view on the tree roots.
I know, but that's why I'm raising it to say, you know, if we've got a lot of potential like that, we'd probably use asphalt, which would be a lot more forgiving. You know, concrete would crack. So I think, you know, in my view, it's about the same choice economically, asphalt and concrete. It just depends on the environment we're in and some of the physical factors in there, whether we chose concrete or asphalt. I think what councils can be assured, it's not our standard practice to just go in and put in cobblestones. You know, for instance, the Frankton one has come to council about the treatment and we've agreed the treatment there. So it's not our standard process to put in the cobblestones without a council decision. So we have existing cobblestones which we need to renew, but when we get to the point where they're at the end of their life, we've got cobblestones that we've turned upside down and in the city and trying to get the most out of them, but when it comes to the point that we need to replace them, it's likely to come before council. So the only decisions we're making at staff on footpaths is really whether asphalt and concrete. In my view, they're largely the same cost, and it's more relevant the environment we're putting them in. Like, is it concrete either side? Do we put in concrete to match concrete either side? Is there likely to be movement in the footpath where asphalt might be better, etc.? So they're just sort of dynamic decisions that we would make sort of project by project.
Okay. I guess, these are all long life assets. It's not like in 3 years' time from now we're going to decide that footpaths are not something we want. So we can assume that the 50 to 65 years is actually how long we will want them. They won't be an obsolete item in that length of time.
Yeah, but we might also, if it's a footpath where we do have movement through trees, we might decide that we're putting in asphalt with, and that every 5 years we've got to replace it. It just depends on the situation and what the dynamics of that particular site is. We would always make a judgment about also about patching footpaths and about renewing footpaths. So quite often, we're pretty lean and mean and optimum. So a lot of the time we're just patching footpaths as well. We're not. We don't have a program to put in new footpaths. They're not large programs for renewal, so we do a lot of work in maintenance as well and patching just small sections of broken footpath as well. So a lot of it's just joining. If it's a concrete footpath, we're not going to put in a patch of asphalt, etc.
Okay. Going to the roading, but I think if I'm reading this right, there are two options and there's site-specific treatment. So chip seal is asphalt's 600% dearer.
Yep. So can I just preface the conversation by saying, look, our default position in New Zealand is chip seal. Chip seal is a really good, cost-effective solution. Where we would go for asphalt, there's a number of reasons. Sometimes if we've got commercial areas where there's a lot of heavy truck movements and the wheels are screwing the footpath up, the chip are not as strong and don't last as long as asphalt. Roundabouts, for instance, we'd put an asphalt type product down, and there's all types of asphalt that we can use, but depending on the technical forces and reasons. The other big one for council is noise. So you raised noise.
Okay.
So clearly, having traffic driving on a smooth asphalt road is a lot better amenity than having vehicles driving on chip seals. So council,
we have that volume.
Yes, so council did have a policy at some stage. They've moved that, decided to move that policy into our asset management planning. But it's around 20,000 vehicles per day. So the council policy is if the traffic vehicles are going to be over 20,000 vehicles per day, we would make the decision to put in a smooth asphalt surface for amenity and noise for residents. So anything under $20,000, it's chip seal, with that proviso being we also do a technical assessment to look at just how the chip seal would perform, i.e. in cul-de-sac. Quite often you'll go to our local roads and you might see a chip seal on the road, but where you've got a cul-de-sac head, you might see an asphalt. That's because we've got a lot of tyres, screwing around and turning there, and the asphalt wouldn't last, the chip seal wouldn't last as long.
Okay, thanks, Chris. So, how do we use this graph here, this whatever this thing is, the schedule
table?
Because I guess this was as a consequence of questions I asked a while ago. Okay. So, how do we make benefit out of this? I mean, there's a lot of technical stuff here which I think I'm comfortable leaving in your guys' hands, but I just want to see the most cost-effective process being put in here that's safe and those sorts of things.
My answer to that, Councillor Mallett, would be hopefully to trust staff that these are decisions that we make every day with cost-effectiveness in mind. The things that we would like to get you involved in, if there are any decisions to go for high amenity in terms of cobblestone, or even the hybrid of asphalt and cobblestones, I think that we would bring those to you, because they're likely to be associated with something like the Frankton Neighbourhood Plan or the Hamilton East Neighbourhood Plan, or
just
the CBD.
Just on the cobblestones issues, what is the value of? It's purely the aesthetics, because actually walking on them, I mean, if you've got high heels, that must be hell. So.
Yeah.
I mean, is it just aesthetics? Is there some other reason you'd have cobblestones?
Look, it's largely aesthetics.
Because they don't last longer.
Clearly, they have maintenance issues higher than asphalt. But the other reason, it's mostly aesthetics, but related to that is in shared zones. So we've got one shared zone out here, and the philosophy behind that was to make the road look like the adjacent footpath. So if we'd done that in asphalt, it would have really looked like a road, and cars would have treated it like a road.
But couldn't you have just put dirty great signs saying up cars yield to pedestrians?
Well, Gary, we're starting to get in a bit of an external debate. He said the reason why we did that.
And I'm challenging the reason. We're talking millions of dollars versus a
Gary,
signs.
This was for information to us. What Chris
and now I'm trying to gain some more information so we can go forward and perhaps be comfortable that we're using our transport budget as efficiently as possible.
Please wait. We're going to have the opportunity in the LTP to talk about levels of service in any areas we want, and this is clearly one. So this is information for us to inform that decision making. We can't change the budget for the next year now in this area.
We're going through an annual plan process as well. No, we can.
We'd have to change.
And at any time we can change that, so that's wrong.
No, Gary, hang on a sec. No, we can't. We can change our policy in an area which will drive the staff's work. We can't say you must do all paths in a certain type of a certain type of finish. We're not in that situation now, today, at this meeting. This is what I'm talking about.
Well, that's why I'm asking these questions, to try and get some information so that I can make, and some people who may or may not be listening can also make a decision on that. But anyway, so...
Hang on, Gary, Gary, if you're going to make comments like that, then you will get interrupted, because these...
All I said is I'm trying to get information so that I can make a decision going forward.
Gary, you made a comment about...
If you find that offensive, you're in the wrong game.
Gary, you're getting out of hand here. You made the comment about a number of your colleagues there, a inference to that. So I'm just asking...
if they have any interest.
No, you said if they're listening.
Oh, if they're listening, yeah.
Yeah, so
right.
that...
Okay, so in a situation like that, I mean, I understand you're trying to demarcate, separate it from the rest of the thing so people can be... And we've done it with those, some of these things that look like pedestrian crossings, but they're not pedestrian crossings. And it's... I mean, I cross those a lot. And there's always that is the car going to stop for me, or am I going to stop for the car? And I'm not aware of us having any accidents, but there is always uncertainty there, and I think that's probably what you're trying to get. But I don't. This thing about uncertainty versus being certain of who's superior in terms of getting forward is wrong, or I don't think is right. So just the issue about having cobbles so that it makes people think that this might be a footpath. I mean, like I said, my point is, why couldn't we just replace that with a sign that says, cars yield to pedestrians? Wouldn't that be a lot cheaper and a clear, objective thing saying, yeah, there's the sign?
I'd probably answer that by just saying that when we installed that shared zone out there were extensive discussions with council about all of those things, and on balance that those discussions were held at the time, and council decided, not staff, council decided based on our recommendation, I have to say, to put it into cobblestone. So we won't be going out and building another shared zone until you decide to put it into the 10-year plan, and then there would be a huge process with council about what it looks like and what the materials are, whether it's asphalt, whether it's cobblestone. We'd probably still continue to promote as staff that it needs to look like the adjacent footpath, and most times where you're putting these, that's probably cobblestones, but it'll be different for every situation. So council will be involved intimately in the discussions on any future shared zones.
Okay, I'd like to break for morning tea now, and we're going to come back to the other questions on the same subject. So we're just pausing for 10 minutes, 11 minutes. Thanks. meeting of the Traffic Management Committee is resumed.
The operational.
Yeah, in the kitchen Traffic Management Committee. Siggy next, and we're going to come back if Gary has any questions on the end of the list there, any further. So try and ask the ones that he might ask in the meantime. Siggy.
Thank you. I just have a couple of short questions. One of them is, Jason, what in the chip seal surfacing is the suits pavements with higher deflections? What does that mean?
So where you've got roads and the sub-base underneath it may not necessarily be as robust, so there's more deflections. The chip seal is more forgiving in that environment.
Okay.
So what are the deflections? Oh, deflections is just the road underneath, it moves. Yeah. Okay. And so with a road that's got higher deflections, and that will just be because the ground underneath it's, yep.
Okay.
A chip seal is preferred. But again, there is a criteria we need to go through, you know, in what environment is it? Is it commercial, the number of vehicles, before we make that final decision.
So would you have chip seal where there's more vehicles? Normally.
Look, and this is really getting into like...
No, don't worry, it's not really that important. What's more important to me is, when we put surfaces on, do we look at not just at the cost, you know, bang for your buck stuff, do we also look at community? Now, I'll tell you why I'm asking this. When we lived in town, we lived in a cul-de-sac, and there was a lovely smooth surface for children to ride their bikes on and everything, and then the council came and put chip seal on, and it was awful, outright awful, for the whole community in that street. And yes, some people don't want kids to ride on the road, but it was a cul-de-sac, it was quiet, all the neighbors were aware, there were lots of children, and it was just pretty cruel actually for the kids to do that. So do we think of the community at the same time as just... consult with them.
Yeah, well, I won't say we consult with them. There is like a policy in terms of like a threshold for when we do chip seal, and then when we would consider asphalt in a residential environment. Certainly letters do go out telling them that their road is to be resealed. I'm not too sure on the specifics of the letter, but actually specifies it will be chip sealed as opposed to AC. So I would need to follow that up, but I'm pretty sure it does.
Can I just jump in there? Yeah. Sorry, Jason. Well, this is a perfect example of the level of service debate. So council has decided, previous councils have decided for costing reasons that we will not put asphalt on roads that are under 20,000 vehicles per day. So we'll only put it on roads that are over 20,000 vehicles per day because it costs, you can see the figures there, 3-4 times as much to put asphalt in. So that's a perfect example of a level of service debate as you go through the 10-year plan. So you can ask to review that, and so you can decide if you want to pay for it that we put asphalt on every single road in Hamilton. But that is a classic level of service debate that council should get involved in and decide what they want to buy.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Thanks.
So I was just going to check that with the General Manager around that's a level of service debate that I'm certainly keen on for the LTP. But also, is Access Hamilton Task Force going to be having a look at this first? Is this included in that?
Not at the details of that. I wouldn't have thought. No.
No. Okay. All right.
Access Hamilton's at the strategy level. This is really an operational level of service decision.
Yeah, okay. And then, so in that LTP, and I know we'll be doing briefings, Chris, will you bring back to us, is it sort of your early indication that you'll bring back to us sort of something similar to what we've been using, or have you sort of picked up on, because, you know, these issues always come up, don't they, with elected members? We're always complaining about cobbles or something else. So you'll be bringing back a recommendation having listened to that, or are you wanting a full discussion at LTP?
I think the process that you'll be seeing is that we'll be coming to council with each of our activities, describing the activities and the levels of service, and that would be the opportune time for council is to signal what level of service debate they want. So I'm picking up that there will be one on chip seal versus asphalt. So
yeah.
So, okay. But when we come to you and talk about each of the activities, it's we'll trigger a debate on the level of service within that activity. pretty much as we've previously done before.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks.
Thanks, Chair. I've got some questions to add on to the very, very good questions that were asked by Councillor Mallett. I thank the Chair for allowing him the time to ask so many questions. On page 40, you say there that the asphalt can last up to 20 years. The up to 20 years, have we got an average as to have we got an average as to what the life is of an asphalt footpath? You know, is it 15 or is it an average of 20 or is it up to 20, which...
Well, look, up to 20, everything being equal in terms of, you know, the conditions, like the footpath conditions underneath. But we find that, you know, life happens, you know, services go in or new services go into streets, and so sometimes footpaths don't last that long. But if all things being equal, there was no work required in the street, and if it was done to the proper spec, it could last up to 20 years.
Yeah, because that to me is important around Gary's calculations around the cost-benefit analysis. If it's an average of 15, because, you know, up to 20 seems to me to be the maximum that any one single footpath might survive without needing major maintenance or a redo, then of course that puts the asphalt cost much higher than the concrete cost. Is that a fair assessment? Should we be keeping some sort of rolling averages as to on average how long, in order to get this cost benefit analysis right, as to what the average asphalt footpath is likely to last?
Well, I'm sure we could. We have a database that captures, you know, when roads or footpaths in this case were put in, and what work is done on them in terms of like maintenance, repairs. So we don't have that information at the moment. I'm sure we could pull that together. We have the data there. Yep. Is that what you're asking for, Councillor?
Yeah, well, I think what I'm looking for is we do business case analysis for a lot of the work that we do now, and we should be doing that for this too, even though the footpaths, presumably in a new subdivision, get handed to us already completed. But we should be looking at where we can get the best bang for our buck. And I think if a concrete footpath potential will last a lot longer, then irrespective of the fact that we've got to borrow more to put that concrete footpath in, the length of life and the depreciation charge each year will obviously be less with concrete than it will with asphalt. So, you know, whilst the upfront cost is higher, the overall cost, per annum cost, could be much lower. Yeah. And the other question is around, you've got concrete footpaths for footpaths, but no concrete for roads. Is that a deliberate omission, or does concrete roading roughly equate to the same per metre cost as footpaths? In the sense, if we use Gary's division between the number of years and the cost,
sure,
concrete roads might end up being a much cheaper alternative to asphalt, and then get us around the problems that we have as to whether it's a rough chip or a smooth chip.
So as the standard practice is, like, we don't build concrete roads. There will be specific examples of that. It would be very expensive. It would come down to cost again. Yep. But Councillor, am I hearing, are these more like levels of service discussions that you're wanting us to...
Well, no, they're really it's more of a capital cost.
Hang on a second. Can I just jump in there? So, look, clearly when we're making decisions on roads, we do a cost-benefit analysis. Like, it is a very complicated but well set out process for making decisions. So, look, roads deteriorate due to the impact that the trucks have on them. So cars don't make much of a difference, but trucks do. So there is a process that we work through that will look at how many trucks are on that road, how many vehicles are on that road, how many axle loadings it is over what time period, and there's an economic calculation there that will tell you whether it's chip seal or asphalt or concrete. So in New Zealand, the traffic volumes need to be way up around the sort of 100,000 vehicles per day to justify concrete. So you just can't, in New Zealand, justify concrete because our traffic volumes are so low. So in New Zealand, generally, chip seal proves to be even though it's got a reduced life, it's the most economic thing to do. For us, though, at times, the economics will dictate an asphalt road because it lasts longer and it's cheaper in whole of life costing to put in asphalt. So just to give you the assurance, that is a calculation that we go through, and we have to. It's an NZTA process that we have to in terms of our asset managements for roads. So I think your question then comes back to footpaths, but I think, you know, most of our footpath work is really itsy bitsy in terms of patching and just fixing up footpaths. If we had large sections of footpath to replace, we could go through the same analysis, but it's just not quite like a road where it's dependent on the loading. I think there's other factors determine the footpath. I think it is aesthetics, it is fitting in, it is the tree roots and the likely sort of movement on the berm, etc. So there's probably a lot more judgment in the footpaths than roads. But just to give you assurance, you know, it's a standard part of the process to look at the cost, whole of life cycle costing for roads.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Mark.
Thank you. I just want to follow up on what Siggy said, and I just want to challenge Chris a little bit on that concrete thing in a minute. But first of all, so am I right? So the developer builds a subdivision and puts in a nice smooth asphalt road, so we all buy these lovely houses so our kids can play on it. Then after time, it wears down, and then it's up to us to reseal it. So we go with chip seal because it's cheaper, thus lowering the amenity value. Is that right?
Correct.
Right. So the only instrument we have at our disposal is how many people use that. That's the only consideration we take at this stage.
Vehicles.
Yeah.
Yep, that's
Right.
the current
Vehicles,
council
yeah.
policy. They've decided, just talking to the chair here, it used to be 14,000 vehicles, but at the last LTP, council put it up to 20,000.
Right, okay, cool. Okay, so and that's, again, just to reiterate, that's a discussion for the long-term plan that we can talk about levels of service in that stage.
So to put that in context, I think the traffic volume on River Road is about probably 15 to 20,000, so that's probably getting
close to it.
Close, and I remember some discussions with Gary a few years ago, I think, Gary, on River Road, where I think it didn't meet the criteria for asphalt and we put chip seal. We can also, there's decisions we can make in chip seal as well. So for chip seals, we have big chips.
Smooth stuff outside his place, same as
Who did?
Yeah. Well, we can change that now, reverse it.
So look, the point I was going to make, there's different chip seals as well. So if you're out in a remote rural, we'll probably have a grade 2 chip, which is a really big chunky chip. But when you're in town, we're probably likely more to use the smaller chips, which are less noise. So there are decisions we can make in chip seal as well about amenity as well. So we try and do that and put the best sort of chip seal surface down.
Right.
But
So
it's clearly a level of service decision for council to make. And you've picked the real problem, I think, is that we have asphalt roads through development vesting, and we haven't had to face it a lot yet, but we're going to get to the point where those roads need renewing, and we put chip seal on.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. That's cool. So how come asphalt roads are half the price of asphalt footpaths per metre? What's that?
Be the undercourse, wouldn't it?
Is it?
Oh, so yeah, I would say in terms of the discrete area and the areas that you're doing, the labour cost would be higher for your footpaths,
Righto.
Versus in a road situation where you're covering more area.
Okay. So wouldn't it follow, and this is where I just want to pick up on Chris's point before, that concrete actually wouldn't be $124 a metre if you're looking at it for a road? I mean, do we have a realistic cost of how much it would be? Because, I mean, every other country in the world can't be wrong. we seem to be the only country that has grey roads as opposed to Australia, America.
I think it comes
we could get that information for you, but generally you don't see concrete roads in New Zealand.
Yeah,
and it's because of the economics, and it's because our traffic volumes are just not that high, is my understanding.
I was just wondering how
but
much
we could get that information. We just haven't focused on it because you see very few concrete roads in New Zealand.
Yeah, I just wonder if it might be, and I don't want to create a whole lot of work, but I'd be really interested to keep an eye on that.
Yeah.
That cost.
Yeah, I know at times the Concrete Society and others promote concrete
Does the Concrete
roads.
Society?
Yep.
Wow.
So
they're as thick as thieves.
yeah, but I guess to my mind, the proof's in the pudding that you don't see even Auckland going to concrete roads. With their high traffic volumes
are starting to come that way, aren't they?
Yeah. So the advantage on a motorway situation, if you can put, there is some value for traffic disruption. If you put a concrete road that's going to last for 60 years, you don't have to get in and interrupt the traffic and all the disruption and the cost actually to go in and rebuild roads on motorways. So, but even then, I'm not aware that the wholesale moving into concrete roads on our motorway system.
So why is it then that cycleways, those cool cycleways down Wairere Drive and even the Western Rail Trail, why are they concrete? Is that because of the weight of the bikes is going to give them maximum?
No, I think a different criteria then, again, like just the longevity of what we're built there. So in that environment too, where there's minimal service, there's probably minimal requirement to do any future maintenance work there. We're best just to lay a long-term solution down. And so that's what we've done. The Western Rail Trail is a good example of that.
Yeah. I was just wondering if it wasn't a bit expensive then in that respect. But
So on the Western Rail Trail, I think it was a requirement of the Urban Cycleway Fund as well. So they dictated the standard for the Western Rail Trail.
Yeah.
But I think it's more an amenity decision for smoothness of ride for cyclists.
Yeah, okay, cool. I'm sorry, I'm taking up too much time, but just one last question, and I don't want to sound too wacky, and I'm surprised that Siggy didn't pick this one up. Plastic roads. They're starting to get reasonably popular in India, and they're going to launch them in Europe shortly. They're these sort of modular roads that are basically made of recycled plastic, where there's pipes ducting in these panels already. Are we constantly looking at the innovation? Because these kind of stuff we're putting in for 10, 15, 20 years, are we keeping our eye on the innovative solutions around the world?
Yes, we are through various groups that we're a part of, and even the contracting community, looking at can we do things better than what we currently do.
Yeah.
So I would say, we've always got it's on our radar. Personally, I don't like to be the first cab off the block. I like to see what other people do and learn from their mistakes or what's worked well before we look to include anything in our strategies in terms of how we manage our footpaths and roads.
Yeah, great.
Chris is...
Thank you.
I was just going to say, there's a number of initiatives, I think, which are coming back onto the table in New Zealand. So a few years ago, there was a company up at Merry tried to put a proposal together to burn municipal waste, incinerate it, and one of the byproducts of that was an ash or that you could go and use for headstones or the like, but also roading aggregates. Right. So it fell over for environmental reasons, but my understanding is the technology has now been better proved overseas, and we might see a few companies trying that again in New Zealand. So it might be a really good opportunity for our waste initiatives, but also a byproduct is for the roading industry. And so I think there's a lot of that type of thing happening here already in New Zealand in terms of those products going into conventional roads, but just as a substitute for aggregate. But I've seen the video clip of the one that you're promoting, I think.
It's cool, eh?
Yeah, just modular sections that you can just come down and quickly put a road together with all the communication channels in. And
that's it. Yeah, in India, though, they're basically putting their plastic bags into their aggregate. And it's, Anyway, dominating. Thanks. Carry on.
Just in relation to Siggy and Mark's first point about replacing smooth seal, we used to call it with asphalt. This council had several years ago, had a massive debate about one particular suburb, Harrowfield. Well, this is not just because Paul is speaking next, but we had a councillor at the time who lived there, and clearly didn't have 14,000 vehicles, didn't even have 1,400 vehicle movements per day, but that was the first developer one that had been done in smooth seal, and that's what caused us to develop our policy back then, that no, Harrowfield wasn't going to get the more expensive asphalt, it was going to have chip seal if it was redone. Yeah. Paula, with that segue.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, no, look, I'm not seeking smooth seal for Harrowfield. I guess I'm a little bit intrigued by this whole 45-minute debate on asphalt and cobbles and so on, because at the end of the day, what we're trying to achieve here, right, is that you want us to be able to set a direction for staff to go away, and the contractors, who are knowledgeable experts and technicians in this stuff, whether we expect medium, low, high levels of service, some of the things we want to be factored into, like aesthetics or noise, depending where it is. That's what you want, and then we'll correspondingly set a budget, right? That's the role of governance in this debate, not to decide whether cobbles or any other form of surface is the most appropriate. I really feel that we're getting a little bit off track.
Bear in mind, Paula, that staff want to bring the issues of things like cobbles, the unusual surfacing, to us.
Yeah, so that to me, we should still stick at the level of service. I mean, obviously some of this has come up, wouldn't it be, Chris, because this shared space just outside council here is literally rolling. The cobbles are up and down and all over the place, and as you drive over it, they're moving all the time. But I also want to ask, presumably the contractors, and we went to visit them on our trip, the contractors make assessments within their budget parameters about different jobs, don't they? They go down to that level. What sort of seal? Why do you need that kind of seal, right? We shouldn't be going there.
Yeah, look, just to be clear, we're responding to council request to bring this information back. I think the information you're seeing in my comment before is be nice to trust us to make good decisions at an operational level, but there are clearly governance decisions that you need to make, and the classic is the 20,000 vehicles is a good example of level of service, but also projects, so that you make decisions on projects, and when they're shared zones, you'll be all over, you know, the look and feel of the shared zones and the palette and the products and everything we use.
So aesthetics and function of the area that you're sealing is an important part of it.
Yeah.
But on a case-by-case basis, I thought I heard you say on a case-by-case basis, you'll come back with a recommendation about what that should look like. I mean, if we were to redo this space, you'd have some views on that. Technicians would inform that, right?
Yes, and look, it would be. I quite often get told in council not to have these things led by engineers, so it'll be multi-parts of council come back for something like that with engineering input. But at the end of the day, they're clearly, from my experience from the shared zone out there, they're detailed decisions that council make because it's a project of quite high prominence as well. And
that's the time to go into that level if we do at all. Okay, thank you. Just a couple of little things. Aesthetics, just want to ensure that aesthetics is part of the mix, not just the cost. I had a business owner here in Hamilton say to me once that he thought the area outside his particular shop, I'm not going to name names, looked like a Firth paving demonstration area because it had about 8 or 9 different paving treatments all in a certain square foot.
One area was actually for a while.
Eh?
It was a trial.
Yeah, and actually when you do go along on Main Street, there are multiple types of surface, and, you know, sometimes, in my view, it's not always the most attractive solution. And we need to really think about, we do need to do the most effective and efficient cost, and I do have faith in the contractors to come and bring that. But aesthetics, we get a little bit of a say in that about how it looks and looks.
Yes, you do. So
in broad sense.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Jason, but in the technical specifications now, there is a concept footpath plan for the CBD.
Yep.
So, and I think that's some work that council did around the CCTP. So there are, and we can send you a link on that, and decisions that council have made in the CBD what footpaths might look like. I'm not sure in the Frankton neighbourhood plan where it's gone to that level, but certainly there's been good discussions with council through Angela and the community about what's achievable, and we've put in some new footpaths there, which is the hybrid mix of asphalt and paving, and beauty's in the eye of the beholder, but I think they're quite nice and probably better than cobblestones and well received, I think. Way better. Yeah.
Mind you, it couldn't have got much worse down that street there for a while, could it?
I think they were the cobblestones that had been turned over about 3 times to get the most out of them.
Okay, last point. In respect to if there were businesses that wanted to contribute by creating a paving solution outside of their business, or they wanted a higher standard of, and they were prepared to contribute towards that, is that possible? Because I know that there are some cafes and businesses that don't like the mess that's outside their business and actually would and have offered to participate in creating more attractive public space. Would we be open to that?
Look, my answer to that would be clearly yes, and I think that we would use some judgment whether we bring something like that back to council. I think particularly if it went against a concept plan for the CBD that you'd signed off and they wanted to do something different. So the danger could be that it's piecemeal and then doesn't fit an overall vision or plan that council might have for the CBD.
Yeah, and if they wanted to bring it forward so it happens sooner, that might be a conversation also.
Yeah, and look, it happens quite often. I'm aware of one that's being discussed at the moment through development. So when new buildings are being developed in the CBD and they would like something done in the footpath outside the premises as well. So quite often the discussions are had that they can do that at their cost, but they are,
there is a bit of a caveat on that though, and this council in the past has discussed that again in relation to Harrowfield. The proposition was put up and defeated that if the Harrowfield residents got together and wanted to pay for smooth seal, should they be able to do that? And in the end, the council decided no, because that would give the people in a higher value area better service than in another part of the city. And that was the rationale in a really broad way at the time. So it wasn't just that though. You got more money, so you get a better, aesthetic sort of presentation of your road. It was also the replacement costs and the maintenance costs, because there's higher replacement costs for areas that have been done to a higher standard. So you've got to factor that in as well. It might cost. You might put a fancy footpath outside a shop, and in 20 years' time, when it needs replacing, you've got to factor that cost in, and it goes on all the ratepayers potentially then. So there were some issues that were discussed around this table before.
And those are the sort of high-level governance issues I'd expect to be talking about. I just make a plea really that we do consider the timing and the rollout, so because you can get ad hoc patchy type of seal when you can only afford to do bit and then another bit and then another bit. That can happen anyway. So sometimes it's about the timing, isn't it? So that considerable stretch of pavement or roading gets done at the similar time, not 3 years in between stretches, if you know what I mean. So I just want that level of discussion, that if we're talking about level of service, it's about, the whole project, not parts of type thing.
So, Chris, would it be correct that if we're going to step out, or there's a proposition to step outside our policy or normal practice, that would come back to a council committee?
Yeah, like another example is Temple View, where the church out there have done a lot of work and had a particular view on the look and feel of the road and the footpaths, and that's the sort of thing that does come back to council. So
it looks great though, doesn't it?
Yeah. But once again, it wasn't patchy. They looked at a proper route length there, and it does look great because it's not patchy and tying in with anything else.
Thanks, Leo.
Chris, I think you mentioned you don't mix asphalt or with concrete. Currently, I notice on areas of Delamere Road and that where the expansion joint is on the concrete footpath, a tree has pushed a section up. You've actually got a ramp which is made of asphalt. Is that just a temporary fix or is that a permanent? It works fine, but I'm just wondering.
I would say that's a permanent solution that they've looked at, given that the routes are probably still moving. It will be easier to pull out the AC and replace that going forward.
Yeah, it stops babies falling out of footpaths and guys on motor scooters and all that sort of stuff. The other question is, when you reseal with chip seal, how many sweeps do you do afterwards? Because the area I'm in was resealed with chip seal around about January, I think it was. It's had one sweep probably 10 days after the seal, and then nothing else. And of course on intersections and that you get in a build-up of the small chip, which is very dangerous for motorcyclists and cyclists and those sort of people. Is there any time limit as to when the sweeper comes back through to pick up all that loose stuff?
Yeah, good practice is that they will monitor the site for that very reason. If it does need to be swept more than once, then they'll do the number of sweeps required.
Is that the contractors or the staff that are doing that monitoring?
Oh, sorry.
It'll be through the contractor.
Contractor, yeah.
Just to be clear, the Alliance does all our work, so the Alliance is us, so that's part of our team, so that's clearly something that we'll take on board. Yeah. But I think there are specifications about when you sweep, but I think Jason's also right that I would expect that we're monitoring that as the Alliance, which is Hamilton City Council, and if it's not good, that we do another sweep. So we'll, Jason will take a note of that and we'll bring that into our discussions with the Alliance. Yeah, particularly the detritus on intersections for cyclists as well as motorcyclists is not very good. Yeah.
Sorry, Leo? Yeah. When's this expected to come to, which part of the LTP discussions would this level of service issue potentially come up?
I think as management we've just been looking at the roadmap for engagement with councillors, and that's imminently I think going to be in front of you, I think at the workshop tomorrow. So you'll see it tomorrow and there'll be a roadmap there and you'll see a program of activity presentations to council. So I think the first set up at the moment are my group in terms of the core services, the waters and transport.
Thanks. So we'll continue the Transport Committee tomorrow. Gary,
won't be in this much detail.
Gary, have you got some more?
Do you want me to have some more?
No.
No. I'm done, thank you.
Okay. So that was about... that was one point of what Jason was talking about. I think there was another one that you had the fatalities chart there that had been asked for. Yep. So chart.
So you'll see in paragraph 15 of the heading there, just providing a summary of the number of fatal crashes in Hamilton over the past 5 years. The table is outlined in paragraph 17 there.
Sorry, is that number of fatal crashes or number of deaths? Because they're not necessarily the same thing.
Yes, the number of deaths.
So okay, it should be worded.
Okay.
There may have been multiples.
So I haven't put in specific detail of the crashes here. There's a lot of information that we can provide in that space. So I'll just provide a very high summary of the number of deaths that we've had per year versus in the City Council, or the roads that City Council control and the state highways within the city that are under NZTA control. So happy to take any questions.
Yeah. Look, I've got just a couple of questions. It would be handy to have, so we can compare apples with apples, the number... Can we have, thank you, Gary, so we can compare apples with apples, the number of kilometres of NZTA roads and our roads, because I think then you can compare the deaths per kilometre, for instance, but also, and this is something our council's asked for at the regional council quite often, could we also have the serious injuries, because I don't believe fatalities tells you the whole picture about road safety, unless you've at least got that next step, if you like.
Okay.
Yeah, because if your fatalities were going down, your serious injuries were going up, then you've got just as much of a problem potentially. You just might have better medical services, might be why it's different. Are there other questions on that part? If not, we can move. Oh, sorry. Oh, my apologies. I forgot that. Gary.
Thanks, Dave. Jason, were you here when Peter Boss was talking about that?
Yep.
Do you want to just comment? Well, could I hear your reaction to that? I guess. Sorry, just to remind you, he was talking about a target of 0 fatalities. I think is what he was saying. Yeah.
Look, you are right in terms of there's other factors beyond our control in terms of, like, the environment is the one thing that we certainly have a very close look at when there are any fatals or serious injury accidents. We're always wanting to make sure that the road was up to the requirements. Is there anything that we can learn from this that will help prevent other serious or fatalities in the future? And the other area has been like the motorist and the vehicle itself. So we have an aspiration to have like Vision 0, every year. So we don't look at what happened the previous year and say, okay, we've got to have one less fatal to meet our KPI. That's not acceptable. That's not the rationale that staff have. So it's very much about making sure that we have a safe environment that the motorists can use, that it clearly indicates where they should be, what they should do, and how they should interact with the other members of the public on the roads.
Is there any suggestion that we're not doing as much as we could do?
Can I sort of jump in there, Councillor? Can I draw Councillor's attention to page 41 of the agenda?
The Access Hamilton
So this
chart.
is the Access Hamilton strategy, and this is where the working party has got to, as part of the strategy development. We've got to define our problems, the benefits we see if we can fix the problem, and then objectives. So what Harry Boss was talking about today was that objective that we've landed with the task force is we will reduce deaths and serious injuries. So what he's suggesting to us is that that should read, we will eliminate deaths and serious injuries. So I think what we've taken is that we'll take, as the Chair said, that this is coming back to you in June to be all locked and loaded. We just wanted to put this as a bit of a chalk under the wheel to say this is where the task force has got to and what their thinking has been. We'll take that notion about eliminate rather than reduce back to the task force. But I just wanted to make a couple of comments, and it's about what Councillor Southgate said about the strategic linkages. If you go right to the top and Safer Journeys, that's the national safety document. Now they have some control over the things you talked about, Councillor Mallett, like drunk drivers. So you've got a safe system that means safe vehicles, safe drivers, safe roads, so all the 3 systems. And their statement on road safety, I'll read it, is a safe road system increasingly free of death and serious injury. So their notion, in my view, is reduction rather than elimination at the high level. If you go to the regional land transport plan, their statement on that is to achieve a significant reduction in risk, deaths and injuries across the Waikato region. So once again, their concept is a reduction and not elimination. So that they'll probably be the 2 strategic documents that we bring to the task force and say, well, our objective statement is consistent with national and regional. And I think for some of the reasons that you've articulated today, like eliminating can be a high-level vision, but it's pretty hard to achieve. But we'll bring that. My point is, we'll bring that back through the task force group.
And just one other question. I don't expect you to know all the details of all the fatalities, but were any of the fatalities as a consequence of chases? Like police chases or things like that. Do you know?
I couldn't give you the actual stats.
Okay, sure.
We could get that if you...
Yes, we can. We can get that.
Okay.
Yep. Thanks. Okay,
Yeah,
Siggy. Oh, sorry.
No, some police, some end up like that, don't they?
Yeah. Siggy?
Great, thank you so much. Well, I just had one question now, just from what Chris said, is, the national and the regional objectives are to reduce. Can we be different and say eliminate? Are we allowed to?
I
do
think
we have
that's
to be
what
the same
we'll
as
test with
everybody
the
else?
working party.
No, but she's asking whether legally, I guess, are we allowed
Yeah, can
to?
we? Yeah.
I don't know. I imagine we can, but we'll be ready for that to answer that question when we come back to the
Put it
task
this
force.
way,
Yes,
Siggy, there was no rule saying that we were enabled to have 40k speed zones outside school, and this council voted that every school should have a 40k speed zone there, and we got that through. But it wasn't. There were not legal difficulties. There were difficulties of NZTA understanding our desire to do that. Let's put it that way. But it happened.
Okay, thank you. The other thing is, and we just talked about that, or Gary mentioned it as well, is about people, because it's yes, it's great to make the roads safe and everything else safe, but we need to make the people safe too. So can we ask NZTA, or can we suggest to them to introduce compulsory driving lessons? Because that's one of the reasons I think Europe is eliminating their road, their fatal crashes. Is that so? Can I have an answer for that sometime?
We'll think about how best to respond to that and bring that to the task force meeting as well. I think off the top of my head, it might be something that we put through the regional transport committee, but we'll think about that and talk to the task force about that.
Okay, cool. The other one was which I want to know whether you can check that. I don't know, Jason, about with the fatal accidents, and there's different reasons, and Gary alluded to that as well, is has the police ever checked, or do they check whether people are actually on not drink driving or anything, but on antidepressants, because there's a lot of antidepressants cause suicidal tendencies, and it looks like an accident, but it might be suicide. So do they check that whether people are high on some of these pharmaceutical drugs?
Look, from the information that I see, it does give information around whether someone was intoxicated or under the influence of substances. So that's as much detail as I have.
All fatalities are checked for alcohol and other there's a toxicology report for each person.
So is that is also pharmaceutical
In the post-mortem, they test everything.
And sometimes the coroner, if they're actually holding an inquest, will go into that in more detail too, after the police have done their report.
Okay, no, that's great, because I think the medical fraternity has a lot to answer there too. So thank you.
Thanks. We've got Leo.
Just looking at the HCC ones, for example, 16, 17, Hamilton is shown as 1, and I presume that's the Anzac Parade one. That will probably be removed after the coroner's hearing, because my understanding is there's a medical event.
So that one there relates to the fatality between a cyclist versus truck on Sunshine Ave.
Oh, okay.
So
the one for Anzac was not shown on this stage?
No.
Okay. Because until the coroner has actually had his hearing on each fatal, it's basically a provisional figure, and some of them sort of come out of the
Note
system.
1 across the page sort of implies that, Leo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the 8th of April one, okay. But I noticed the 19th of April, which the CAS data was taken. Yeah. Do you receive a report from the serious crash unit as to the contributing factors for all fatalities within the city?
Yes.
You still do?
Yep.
Okay, that's good.
Thanks.
If I can just go to page 95, under the 10-year growth and infrastructure report, under transportation, it's got a transport network that is safe to use, okay? No problem with that. But I firmly believe that a network must also be efficient and economically viable as well. I'm just wondering whether we could not add those 2 words in there. Because, hey, you can have the safest system in the world if everybody gets around on a cycle or walks or something like that. It's going to be very safe. But it's not going to be a hell of a efficient at all, you know. So,
yeah. So Councillor Tooman has jumped to our KPI report. So they're locked into our 10-year plan, what we decided last time. Once again,
there are efficiency KPIs in that suite of things. You're just seeing the exception reporting here now, you're not seeing the other ones?
So we're not going to have a discussion on that yet. We've raised it and we can...
We've got a report coming up.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, yeah. Okay, we've got Mark, sorry.
One question. So, it's probably written somewhere, but I've never found it. If our roads are deemed to be the cause of a fatality, like it could be argued that, for example, that poor guy who lost his life down by the BP in Tristram Street was because the motorists couldn't see him because of our roundabout height, etc. Are we actually liable? Could we get in a more litigious situation? Could we be done for that? Do you know what's the rules around that?
Look, my answer to that is probably increasingly so. So you know, we have an obligation to make sure our roads are as safe as possible. So look, every time we have a serious accident or a fatal, as Leo's indicated, we work with the police and we get their report, which is quite objective in terms of contributing factors. So we always are very proactive in looking at contributing factors and whether the road could have been better.
Yep.
I think a lot of times you can find the road might be compliant, but could it have been better? So we'll do whatever practical. After every fatal crash, we always ask ourselves, could we have something done better, whether it's vegetation or line marking or whatever. But to answer to your question, I think the answer is increasingly so, as coroners are looking into accidents and causes of accidents.
We had quite a celebrated case where unfortunately the only city in New Zealand where a cyclist has killed a pedestrian up by the old roundabout at Flagstaff or at River Road, Wairere Drive crossing, and there was the coroner said that there was not a clear sight line. It was a right angle turn, so we had to change that, and I think we put some mirrors in and changed the corner as a result of that. Right. While we weren't legally liable, we hadn't got a good design, and
Because are there any cases in New Zealand? I know in America there certainly have been, in Europe, where councils and authorities have been sued, for their facilities causing the death. And I wonder do we have indemnity, or what's our situation on that?
Look, I'd have to get more information on that to give you a proper response to that.
That's actually come up before that issue. We've had some, but mind you, a few years ago, that provided the answer then, and it may have got tougher now from our lawyers, was that provided we've made an honest attempt, followed staff professional advice, followed policy, and that the councillors themselves or the council itself wasn't necessarily liable, but things are developing, like the zoo case last year. Yeah, we followed the rules, but the rules weren't enough.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I wonder if we might look into that maybe.
I think that we will we'll follow through on that and just be very clear on that. So
thank you.
So that was all on that. So on to the Park and Control Task Force, which is an update on the consultations that are happening and the areas we're going to have a look at lunchtime.
So just wanted to,
Sorry, this is page 37. Is it 30? Yeah, 37 and correct. 38.
Yep. So through the chair,
questions? Sorry. We're doing the walk. Okay.
Another example is we've got a date for no year.
Yep.
I've made the point to Leanne, and she's going to ride herd on these managers that don't have necessarily great grammar skills because they're planners and engineers. Okay, the Access Hamilton Task Force, was there anything else there, Chris? Or Jason? 21, paragraph 21, page 38.
I was just going to bring in, you've mentioned it already, the attachment that talks about at a high level that what we've been discussing at the Access Hamilton Task Force, identifying the problems, benefits and objectives. We are planning to come back to this committee on the 20th of June with a full paper on that, so that was more for information. It's been a good discussion what we picked up from Mr. Boss today, and we'll bring that up with the task force going forward.
what's not there, councillors I think have seen it though, might remember we've got a full A3 size list in fine print of projects and how they link together and where they form, that's being looked at as part of that. It's not just the high level strategy, we've got a set of projects and we're working out how they fit into that strategy. Can we make sure that all the papers go to Councillor Mallett to read before they go out to councillors? Well, then you better shut up. Okay, the Hamilton-Auckland Passenger Rail, Chris, was there anything else we needed to note the dates under paragraph 29 for the briefing and the next report and the sorry? Well, I don't know. It could be 2018. Who knows?
You found us out. Yeah.
We're going to hear this all day, I can see. Gary.
Paragraph 27, in the meat of it, the report contains the details of staff's high-level assessment of the 2011 Rail Working Party report. Where is that? Is that report available? Or is it being...
Yep, we can send a
is that kind of the basis of what this stuff's coming from?
Yeah, so in 2011 when the service was being muted there, the parties decided to get a consultant to put everything together and do, I guess at that stage, what was considered a business case to put it all together. So it's quite a comprehensive report. So that is available. It's certainly on the Regional Council website, but we can send a link to councillors. So the point we're making there, I guess, is that the issue is sort of floating to the surface again in some recent discussions. So Regional Council are looking to come to the Regional Transport Committee and get some directions in the 3rd of July. So they've put out a discussion paper about various options, and one of those options, Councillor Mallett, is to do nothing. Other options are to spend some money and build a strategic case for the rail, which will cost some money and some cost implications of that. And I can't quite remember some of the other options, but there's a suite of options there. What they're asking
You're talking about that 2011 report?
Yeah, the 2011 report
it says
is still got...
There are 3 broad options. Is that what you're...
The 3 broad options will be in the updated report, you know, looking at today and moving forward and how we move that forward. And so we've been asked as an interested party or a stakeholder, whatever you want to call it, council, to have a view on those options. So that's the process we've set out in the paper, is how we'll get the view from this council, is we'll come to a briefing on the 15th of June. Then we'll put those options to you on the 20th of June, and I expect you'll make a decision that will form our view going into the Regional Transport Committee meeting of what we'd like to do. Would we like to spend money to build a strategic case? Would we like to do nothing? And I just can't remember the other options at the moment.
I might add that there's, I've been having discussions with Chris about whether we need to spend much money to build a strategic case, whether it's actually a higher, more political level. It's got to be a decision, a case put and decision made then first before we spend megabucks on consultants. So that I'm going to put that as a option 3B or something like that, you know, at the briefing meetings. I think that we haven't established the political will or otherwise yet. And I think personally think that's something that we need to be looking at, you know, make sure that we're all on the same page, or if not, what the majority feeling is at least around council table. And we've got to have the arguments for and against put in order to do that, but not necessarily by a consultant at this point, in my opinion. Yeah. So are there any other discussions on that? You've got the timeline for 2017? Okay, if not, sorry. Oh, geez. Okay. Deputy Worship, or Acting
I'd hate
Worship.
to give you advice on IT matters, Mr Chair.
No, well, it's hiding behind the...
Very good IT. You know, I've been a strong supporter of this new system. The only thing that worries me in terms of I just come back to that footprint and obviously around property ownership and zoning and all of that. Can you give us some reassurance that we will not miss the opportunities out there in terms of the base?
I think this council would have to make pretty immediate and significant decisions on the base if you were to want to preserve a footprint for park and ride.
What does that mean?
So what that means is the location that's one of the locations that's tagged in the district plan is being developed off Tasman Road. So the sections are developed on the market. So my view, and we'll come back with the pictures, but there's room to put in probably the station within the road and the rail reserve. But if you wanted a facility for park and ride, depending on what size you'd need, the council would need to buy some land. We're looking at other
sorry,
options.
I'm not after debate. I think Martin's asking, will this time frame enable us to make that decision go or no go that you're talking about that would need to be made? When you say it needs to be made quickly, is this time frame going to allow it to be made quickly enough?
Yes.
Because I don't want the discussion on the
No,
actual site.
I absolutely appreciate that. And as I said last year under the previous administration, when we resolved to have this report completed, you know, there's an anxiety around losing opportunities for future proofing. So you're saying that with what you know, that's a reasonable timeline for us to make a crunch decision. And as I understand it, then the hands can go up around this council table if a crunch decision is required.
Yes, I think
yes
so.
No?
Like I think yes.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
You think yes? That's a very definite answer, Mr. General Manager. Rob.
Thanks, Chair. The report that the Regional Council had done in 2011, I wonder if that could be made available before we start these briefing sessions. I haven't been able to source a copy of it. I've heard lots about it. And I also recall from the Frankton Hotel Sunday afternoon meeting that I think it was Sue Moroney mentioned that the university were updating the business case figures that they did back in 2011 in this report. And I'm just quite keen to see whether or not we can get those figures, if they're available, in time for this series of meetings, so that at least we can look at what the business case is now as opposed to 2011. And I think that report will be useful because certainly I wasn't around then, and I guess most of the other councillors wouldn't have been aware of that earlier report.
Yep, look, I'll take in action today or tomorrow to circulate that report, and I think there might have been an associated council paper, so I might look for that as well.
And there was also a 2006 or 7 report as well, which was even more extensive, really. That was what that was based on, so it might be...
So that was a regional council report too, was it?
Yeah, but we were involved in including funding it, so some of it. So we should at least get the link to that.
Yep.
And I'll look to see if we can get any updated information as you've suggested.
Because certainly the current business case should look a lot different to even 2011, given growth and a whole bunch of, and all the things that are happening in that corridor going north.
I think one of the big differences also, Rob, is the North Waikato is suddenly it's become crucial that they do something about it, whereas that council never saw that as such an issue back then.
And certainly wouldn't have in 2011. Yeah. Good. Thank you.
Any other? Oh, sorry, Paula. Put my glasses on. Yeah. Well,
Just some information that I maybe can add. There was a 2011 report. There was a consequential report at council in the last term of politics to update the WRC to update the information. And also you might want to look into some of the discussions that were had at UNISA, in which those mayors were also presented with some updates, Upper North Island Strategic Alliance, that the mayors attend, and mayors and chair, and there was some update work there, report also from Kiwi Rail that exists, very pertinent to the interconnection with rail and the Auckland developments with the inner city rail loop and the aspirations of Kiwi Rail and where their priorities are. Those are all good pieces of information to seek out.
Now, Martin, you wanted it to take part in a debate.
No, I don't mean opportunity for very brief, concise discussion, which I'm capable of.
Can we time this? The very brief? What's our definition of that?
Brief and concise.
Okay. Sorry, I'm going to put the resolution that the General Manager's report be received, seconded by Rob, and it's open for very brief debate.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's really. I just compliment the GM on a good report, and I want GMs. No, and I'm looking for that in community service. I'm looking at that across the board because this, again, for our two major operational committees. These reports, in my view, are important, and through the Chair's report as well, to pick up issues of recent, of immediate issues and substance to us. And Paula's overview around this, I think, was very useful. Thank you for that, Paula. What I picked up, for example, from that meeting at the Railway Hotel that a number of us attended was that the current government and the Green Reds in waiting are very open-minded, and obviously I think even with the current government there's definitely an open-mindedness, and I note interestingly the presence of the Associate Minister of Transport, the Honourable Tim McIndoe, at that meeting, and his very helpful comments. Simon Bridges visited us the other day, very helpful comments. I think I will make an observation that we as a city want to do what we can to work with all of the players, and I think personally we do need to get cracking just to get the appropriate future proofing of this route, and also again it comes back to the issue around population data. There's no doubt Tuakau, Pokena, Tikawhata, Huntly, Ngarewa, Hamilton, this is going to be a major commuter corridor. So to me all the ducks in my humble view are starting to line up for this service.
Is there any other discussion? If not, I'll put the resolution by show of hands. Those in favour, against, carried unanimously. Thanks. Okay, councillors, we're on to the schedule of reports which is page 42. Thanks, Jason. And the table of reports is on page 45, which I think is a pull-out one in your books. Yep. So that, who's giving that? Leanne, are you talking to that? Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start with an apology, Gary, because I note in point 13 that I should have included 1 June 2017, just so I have heard and will follow through. Elected members, you may recall that there has been discussion at previous committees, council and committee meetings this triennium, initiated by Councillor O'Leary, requesting an overview of the work that's coming forward for you to consider as members of the respective committees. So this is the CE, as a consequence, the CE undertook to provide a schedule of reports. We're not calling it a work program just because of that terminology is used differently within the business units to mean project-related things, but so a schedule of reports to each of the committees to give you some oversight from a calendar year perspective about what's coming forward at the various dates. I want to make a couple of comments. One is that we're working with staff to develop a triennium view where possible, and as a consequence of that, you know, while some activities on the schedule lend themselves to a very planned view, I want to stress the organic nature of the documents in order for them to be effective for you. So we will continue to work with the GMs to ensure that the schedules are updated as appropriate. So I'm happy to take any questions if you have them.
Yeah, just particularly looking at the chart, councillors, if you think something should be coming back at a different time, or you want it earlier, or for instance, or it's a good time to float that now. Eh? Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm just looking at this here. So Gary, you're first. I shouldn't even bother looking at my list. You're always first.
Thank you, Leanne. Page 45, the schedule we're talking about. the last box is BAU reports. I guess that means business as usual, does it?
That's correct.
Okay. Then, okay, why is Valley Terrace remedial options? That's there's a number of things in there that don't strike me as business as usual.
I'm happy to hear your suggestions for an alternative title. I'll explain the intent of that was really to describe matters that would need to be brought to your attention by staff, that they're likely to be more organic in nature. They'll arise from operational, staff-driven activity, but for whatever reason, staff believe that elected members either need to be informed about them or that need to escalate some matters to your attention for your consideration. So we're trying to distinguish that category from planned activities and known in advance activities, if you like.
Okay, so I understand what you're trying. I mean, I applaud what you're trying to do. You know, trying to give us a view of what's coming up and what meetings you can go on holiday for and what, etc. Okay, thank you.
Though just on that particular one, there's no date for that, and some others, but they have put the year in above there, Gary. Is there, so when there's nothing highlighted?
When there's nothing highlighted, the intention is because we're preserving the space to have consistency across the triennium. So there may not be a box shaded out for a meeting because one of those things, for example, a policy may be planned to come to next year or the year after during the triennium.
Okay.
For example, in the strategic reports, there's a whack of bylaws at the bottom there.
Yes.
My understanding was all bylaws have to be checked every 5 years or something like that, don't they?
Yeah, and so it's potentially...
sorry, Leanne, so are you just putting in there a placeholder, I guess, for within this triennium? I know that the 5 year or whatever the anniversary it is that bylaws have to, how often is it bylaws have to get done?
5 years.
It is 5. So are you saying within this triennium, these things will come up for their 5 yearly... Oh, you're not?
No, I'm not, although you're on the right... Well, the point is, the thing that we heard elected members ask for was visibility of where things for which the committee was responsible, so the things for which a committee was responsible, when they would need to be considered. It may be the case, in the example of a bylaw, that it won't come up during that triennium because there is a 5 year view of it. Nevertheless, it is a matter that sits within the jurisdiction of that committee. So knowing actually that it doesn't need to be reviewed was part of the logic here. And it may sound counterintuitive, but it's also to give you confidence that nothing has been left off.
Okay, so theoretically, this list, not theoretically, actually this list is the terms of reference for, is the mandate for this committee, if you like. So those are the things that this committee is responsible for, and some of these things that we're responsible for, we have a work in progress or a work plan or a report plan to come to. But some of the things that this committee is not responsible for, we're not planning to do anything unless, and until such time something pops up on that, we will then put it on this. Is that what you're saying?
Well, obviously it isn't the terms of reference, but yes, I think if I take your intent, it is designed to reflect
the gambit of the things,
the terms of reference for the committee. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Angela.
Thank you, Mr Chair. And yes, I have been requesting this since the start of the term, so it's great to see that it's come forward. And this form is fine. And Leanne, you said you'll be updating. It's a bit of a living document.
It is
pretty hard to list actually everything we do. Huge business. I was just wondering why the Central City Transformation Plan hasn't had having a reporting date this year, because we haven't had an update on that particular strategy. I'm aware it will be included in the LTP, won't it? So is that the reason it's not on here?
That's part of the reason it's not on there. The other reason is that there's still work going on within strategy unit, which is our source base for this part of the schedule, in terms of working out exactly when the reporting will be coming forward to the various committees. So there are aspects of this document at the moment that are incomplete.
Okay, and then when, so is it your intention that this will be a standard report each time the committee comes, or just when there's changes?
My suggestion was going to be that rather than having it as a standing agenda item, that it is circulated with the agenda every month.
Okay.
And so that you have it handy so you know, and if there are any changes that have been made since the last time we circulated it to you, we will list what the changes are and bring those directly to your attention. I wasn't intending to bring it forward each time as an approval thing.
No,
if you're
no.
comfortable with that.
And that wouldn't be good governance at all, and it would be impossible to be able to manage an agenda with that. It's constantly changing. Just a question, what's the Smart City Plan strategy? I've never heard of that before.
It's
a new plan? Is this a new plan under this new council?
It's so that we remember to put the year in each line.
No, the chief executive was, remember he spoke to us briefly that he was getting, doing some work in that area?
That's right. So it's a chief executive's initiative around the ability to use technology more appropriately for both.
Don't use this as an example.
No. All right then. Use technology in such a way that it can increase efficiency and productivity for council, but also what are the opportunities for provision of technology into the community. So like the trials we've done with the LED lighting at Hillcrest, for example, parking technology.
Yeah, okay, so, but that's something that you're expecting at one point will have sign-off from governance?
Yes, so a lot of these things are either in formation, for example, and we'll bring it to you when it's drafted up into a point where we think we've got something sensible to bring forward.
Okay. The public transport development plan, that's another one I have.
That's a regional council thing coming out of their committee that we've got any two of Leo, myself and Jeff as appointed members.
Okay, all right.
It's underway.
Yeah, okay. So comment now, or I don't need to debate on it, but I can...
Yeah, really quick comment.
Really quick. I just
wanted
to say, look,
arguments.
No, look, it is good governance, and I appreciate the time it's taken to put this list forward, and it just means that as elected members we get an early heads up on what's coming, and it can also prepare, and it can also answer questions that we don't need to bother other people with. So thanks, appreciate it.
Thanks. Martin.
The alcohol, gambling, psychiatric substances open up. It sits in G&M and not community services. Is there? Have I misinterpreted in terms of reference or these particular angles of these reports?
If I can, the basis of that is that the policy at the moment, once the policy is formed, sits within my group under the regulatory functions for the regulatory controls of the policy. So that's why it sits with us. In terms of the, as I say, in terms of the regulations of the policy, but there's no reason that it couldn't sit elsewhere if governance thus decided.
That's a discussion. I'm happy the chairs and key staff can talk about that. I don't die and ditch on this stuff, but I just found that curious. Secondly, I take it a governance manager overarching all of these things is, of course, our Hamilton plan and the broad high-level type of documents we have that inform all of this. That's a different beast, right? And the only other thing is I just want to know is where do we capture precisely this council's ongoing policy and debate around future city boundaries, particularly as you know we're talking 2020 when the expressway finishes, and that's the northern triangle, the southern links, and I'm just trying to think in terms of which particular report
if I could
our position statement gets captured.
Okay, so I'll just make a comment and then turn it over to the General Manager for any further comment he may want to make. There will be a schedule of like this for council.
Hugs.
Well.
Yeah, so that's more that sits under council as against this committee.
No,
that's okay.
Hugs. Hamilton Urban.
Yeah, Hugs will be
District Plans Council.
And sorry, if I can, Deputy Mayor, to be helpful, I think there are resolutions around those already within this the future-proof discussions and recent that come to this committee. So it would filter into this committee.
But what and I get Hugs, and I'm not here to litigate today, but the differentiation between a urban growth versus community of interest issues, and that's where our discussion is leading us around some of the boundaries. And you're saying that sits in a council, or I'm just wanting to know which report monitors that ongoing?
And I don't know that I can give you a perfect answer, Deputy Mayor, because it's a little bit outside my area of activity expertise. But what I can reassure you is that there's a schedule of work for each of the committees. If you believe that there's something that's missing from any of these schedules, we'd be very grateful for you to either notify Governance Unit or the General Managers, and we can talk about it.
Yeah, and if I might, I think even that discussion that started when we were here last time, when we were speaking about those community of interest as well as the land and the spatial planning. And I think the initial discussion was how, to your point, Deputy Mayor, that yes, we might get the land and spatial planning and boundary discussion going. How does that then move into service provision and then into delivery? And I think it generates from here, but it may well be that another committee would then pick it up as a resolution from this committee, if that makes sense.
The Chairman, all I'm wanting to make sure is, as we do in our silos, and the Chair may have a view, all I want to do is just make sure that, we have that overarching aspiration. I think by majority we've got clear resolutions in terms of our negotiation with Waipa and Waikato, at the point at which Southern Links is finished, the expressway is finished, where we think we may be heading in that area, and it's just making sure that the appropriate document captures that, and that's the point of reference as we monitor that.
Well, it's certainly been raised, that issue, in future-proof discussion most recently, and the report on that's coming back at the next meeting. Yes, I believe so. Yep. So if it's not there, there'll be a problem, because it should.
Yeah, because all I'm trying to say here is that this City Council, has a clear policy and an aspiration in that area. It may be long-term, short-term, whatever, but it's just making sure we capture it in the right document, that's all.
Mark, thanks.
I've absolutely and totally forgotten my question, so carry on.
Well, that's good. If we put you at the end of the list, it'll speak. Don't give your speaking slot to Gary. Okay, are there any other questions on that? If not, sorry.
If I could take the liberty, a number of people have inputted into the design of these, and often unrecognised group of people that work very hard to support the GMs in the governance group are the executive assistants to the GMs, so I'd particularly like to note their contribution to this report. Thank you.
Laura and Tessa. Yeah. Okay, so the recommendations on page 42, which I'll move, seconded by Siggy. Note, Gary, that it's got the year in there, so we should be right. Very good start. Yeah. A and B, I'll show of hands vote. Those in favour, against, carried. Thanks, unanimous. So, councillors, I thought rather than doing the return of growth cell in the next 10 minutes, before 12 minutes, we might go to the point 10, the council submission to Ministry of Business and whatever's discussion document on urban development authorities. Are you all right with that, Kelvin?
Yeah.
So that's on page...
Mark's not here, but I think I should be able to answer most of the queries.
You watch, he'll come running in because he's probably watching on TV. Come on, Mark, come on down.
You've got to trust Kelvin or get around here.
Yeah, otherwise it's up to Kelvin.
Yeah, you don't want that.
Do you want to come round to the front there, Kelvin? Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. So you may recall we had a discussion around the UDA provision. So the UDA, or the Urban Development Authorities, is a piece of legislation that's going through a process with government at the moment. We have had an initial discussion with officials from government or from MB around that. We then, I think, I recall having a discussion with yourselves at a briefing around the very high level discussion, and this is the first round of consultation before they move through a legislative process. Because there's a lot of detail that's unknown, and they're really looking at higher principles around the powers of urban development authorities, it made sense for us to align with Local Government New Zealand's submission. That's what we've done, and you'll see that in the draft. And so from there, I'll leave it at that and take any queries if I can, in Mark's absence.
Sure. Angela's been very quick off the mark. She's beaten Gary, so she's first.
That's pretty good, eh? And I only have one question. Just in the submission, and you have to forgive me, I'm a bit blind. No, I'm not blindsided by this. I haven't actually had the time to get my head around yet another thing from government. But we've put in our submission on page 78 on 1.2, and we've said UDAs have the potential to create a significant positive legacy. HCC has noted that the use of equivalent organisations overseas has given us new purpose and new life, blah blah blah, to regeneration. Can we not regenerate and revitalise parts of our city ourselves? Do we really have to? And given, Calvin, you said, you know, a lot of detail was unknown, I'll save some points about all of that for debate, but can we not, do we have to submit on this? Do another thing that they're giving us?
No, we don't have to. If council decided that they didn't feel the need to submit, there's no requirement to submit.
No. Yeah.
Are you talking about that particular point or about the whole thing, Angela?
No, I know we don't have to submit on anything, but I guess my question is, given we don't have, there isn't a lot of the detail.
Sure.
We haven't really had, aren't able to really discuss it then from a city perspective.
Correct. So on that point itself, it's an introductory comment really. It's not material to the submission. It's simply saying we do understand and we have looked at. For example, I guess the best example is the areas of the Docklands in Melbourne and in what they're doing around the Darling Harbour in Sydney at the moment, where the powers of the UDA have been in around compulsory acquisition of land and planning powers and those things. And Luke has joined me, who does have more intimate knowledge around these things, which is very useful.
Fast.
So that point in itself is not material to the whole submission. So
what we do know and what detail has been provided to us, is there anything at an early stage that is going to enable us to do something we can't do now?
Yeah, so the intent is that it would give you more planning. So sorry to wind us out, but yes, it would, in short. The idea is that a UDA would provide a council, in agreement with government, the ability to provide faster planning powers, depending on what the proposal is, faster planning powers, compulsory acquisition powers, consenting powers and the like. And the idea is that depending on what the proposal is and the powers requested, government would then say yes or no to that, and then would establish a UDA either in just for that area and just for that project, or again, depending on the proposal, it could be one that sits in perpetuity for other projects that may come up. So it does give us, it would give council more flexibility. So for example, if there was areas of the city that were in multiple title holdings that were very difficult to try and get agreement on, where you might want to redevelop, so you want to amalgamate those holdings and work that process through, that's a very long and drawn out process through council processes. But under a UDA, you may have that power to have higher levels of compulsory acquisition, or you may have higher powers to get consent and agreement that a council otherwise might not have.
So was there any conversation, why didn't the government wrap this up in special housing areas, or is it vastly different mechanisms to that?
No, it's a very good question. I don't want to speak on behalf of government. I think it's another policy tool that is separate. So special housing areas, again, were always initially around assisting with zoning requirements. Within Hamilton, initially the concept was, well, we are zoned to the boundary, we don't require that. But then in discussion with the minister, seeing the opportunities to just how we rechange our zoning and land use in a faster method, that's the limitations of the housing accord. This would give you a far-ranging powers that include acquisition and planning and consenting powers.
And those are those all things that as a council we couldn't do ourselves, like with a change to the district plan, with a fast-tracking consents, with anything like that? We literally could not do it by ourselves?
Look, just reiterating what Kelvin has said, there are some things we can do, and I suppose that we already are doing in terms of expediting urban development. I think the simplest way to view the proposal by the UDA is to think of it in the overarching context of government's reform around urban development in New Zealand. So as you said, there's lots of things happening at the moment. Productivity Commission's been doing a range of stuff in investigations. There's recent reforms to the Resource Management Act that have come out. We've had SHA legislation that's come out, and this is another tool. Now, I think if to boil it right down, I think Nick Smith last Friday made the most compelling summary for what the whole purpose of a UDA is. He said New Zealand cities have grown basically incrementally at the edges since the beginning of European civilisation in New Zealand. The country has reached a point of maturity now where you've got old established urban areas that are ripe for renewal, where there's existing resources and where there are opportunities to regenerate those areas in major centres around the country. And this legislation and the proposal, I should say, rather than the legislation itself, is aimed around that purpose, mirroring the best examples around urban regeneration in places like the UK, the US and Australia. And it's so the difference of this as opposed to an SHA is that this is about projects that have long timeframes. So we're talking about duration periods of 20, 25, 30, 40 years, long rollouts, big infrastructure hurdles, big land acquisition hurdles. And it's the purpose is to provide a framework to enable that sort of scale of regeneration. So the best example at the moment in New Zealand would either be this could be used for an equivalent of a rebuild of a city after what happened in Christchurch, like with Sierra. So Sierra's powers were very similar to a UDA. The other one is what you've seen in terms of regeneration in the past around Wynyard Quarter and Britomart, and the Tamaki project in South Auckland, where Housing New Zealand have divested all those assets into a standalone corporate entity.
So the predominant legislation stopping us to be able to do this ourselves is what? Is it the RMA?
No, it's this wraps up a whole range of, or potentially the proposal touches on a whole range of legislation. So as Kelvin said, RMA is part of it. Local Government Act could be part of it. The other one is around property acquisition. So the big one really, the biggest difference and the most, in some ways potentially the most controversial, depending on how you view it, is the ability for the government to override private property rights for private development gains. Now, the government already does that through the Public Works Act, but this would create a mechanism that would enable the government or a UDA entity to compulsorily require land for the specific purposes of urban development, not for a public work.
So your question about could we not do it ourselves, the answer is if you had a very permissive district plan and you were nimble enough, but of course that's through the RMA process and local government, that gets hindered to how permissive you can be and in terms of other objectives of the legislation. So Luke's point is that the UDA crosses across all of those areas of blockage in terms of legislation across numbers of different legislation, and that's the biggest benefit if you see it in terms of getting regeneration, that it takes powers from across numbers of legislation that otherwise hold you up by doing a district plan here and then an SHA here and then an individual tool.
So it's about creating a new beast rather than actually looking at the legislation that's binding us up, isn't it?
It's creating a new entity. Yeah, absolutely.
That's quite.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So much for my plan of getting this one done before lunch. But so I want to break now just simply because we've made the arrangements, and we'll come back to the guys, if that's all right, at 1:30 sharp, and Gary will be first up. So make sure you're all on time.